Welcome to the Lincoln City Council meeting of January 9th, 2017. Let us all rise for a moment for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silent meditation.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
In accordance with the LB 898, a copy of the Open Meetings Act is posted in the back of the chamber. Before we get started with the regular meeting, we'd like to welcome Mayor Beitler for the Mayor's Award of Excellence presentation.
Thank you very much. This is the Mayor's Award of Excellence for November, which is the very best Mayor's Award for Excellence that I've made in all my time in office. And it revolves around the case of the plasticized pizza. It's being presented this time to two Lincoln police officers, Jorge Dimas and Matthew Schiffelbein. I hope I pronounced that right. They were nominated by Captain Jason Stilley in the category of customer relations for a random act of kindness performed last September. On Labor Day, the officers were sent at 10 p.m. to a local laundry business regarding a disturbance between a customer and an employee. The customer had purchased a mini pizza for her 9-year-old daughter to eat while they finished the laundry. The employee microwaved the pizza. Unfortunately, it was still sealed in its plastic wrapper, so the pizza was totally inedible. The employee did not accept responsibility for the error and refused to make a new pizza or to refund the customer's money. Still, he said the officers quickly diffused the situation and determined that the true victim was the 9-year-old girl, who was obviously both hungry and upset. Because it was late on a holiday, the officers knew that the mom and daughter did not have any options, particularly to get food quickly. Without a second thought, they drove to a local business and spent their own money to buy food for the pair of them. It wasn't until they returned with the food that they learned it was also the girl's birthday. So they had changed the dynamics of an unpleasant situation, to say the least, for the mom and the daughter by showing their compassionate human side. Still, he wrote that neither officer told anybody about their actions. The story came to light when the girl's grandmother called the department to thank the officers. Still, he said this speaks volumes about the character of officers Dimas and Schiffelbein. Simple act highlights, obviously, their exemplary customer service to the citizens of Lincoln. So it's my pleasure to present this team with the Mayor's Award of Excellence for October. Please join me in congratulating Jorge and Matthew for their hard work and their commitment to the city of Lincoln. Thank you, gentlemen. Like to say a few words?
Thank you for the award. I'd like to thank at least my family that's here, my wife, the kids, and in-laws, and my brother-in-law. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I also like to thank my family. My grandmother was able to make it today. My kiddo's sick, so my wife couldn't make it. And also my pastor, Jeff Scheich from Christ Lutheran, is here as well. Thank you guys very much.
I think their boss has a word to say, too.
Obviously a kind gesture, and one, the humility just is, it just compounds what a great job they did. But something about this story is there's nothing that the Lincoln Police Department trains Matt or Jorge to do something like this. This is inherent within them from their parents, from their rearing, from their families. And I think that you would find that this is such a typical example of what Lincoln police officers are about. And they're not looking for the accolades. They're not looking to be on the front page of the Lincoln Journal. but just doing a job and doing it with empathy and kindness. And very proud of both of them, as I'm sure that their families are and should be. So, thanks.
Thank you, congratulations. Right, we'll allow folks a few minutes to exit the chambers. Thanks for being here today.
Good story.
To help all who remain understand the order of the city business, the business of the city council, it goes like this. The clerk will call the items listed on the agenda under public hearing, and anyone who wishes to speak on an item should come forward after the clerk reads that item. The applicant and those in favor should speak first, followed by those who are opposed. The applicant may then make one short rebuttal. Each speaker should begin by stating name and address and whether you're speaking in favor or in opposition to that item. Testimony will be limited to 5 minutes, and as a courtesy reminder, the timer will sound after 4 minutes. After all public hearings, the council will vote on resolutions and items listed under third reading. And on the second and last meetings of the month, immediately prior to adjournment, anyone may speak on any issue that is not on our agenda for today, nor for planned for a future agenda. Agendas are located outside the entrance to chambers, printed agendas. It's also online at lincoln.ne.gov under City Council. Parking passes are available, presumably on the counter with the clerk. And with that, Teresa, will you please call the first item of business?
Certainly. We would request those giving testimony to please clearly state your name and address and to sign in on the sign-in sheet laying on the podium. Our first item of business is our public hearing consent agenda, items 1 through 18.
Do we have any of the folks who are being appointed today? Yes, Judy, thank you for coming forward.
If I may, Judy Halstead, Lincoln Lancaster County Health Department. Item number 3 on your agenda is the appointment of 2 of our members to the Air Pollution Control Advisory Board. They are both here today, and so I'm going to ask them to just come up and introduce themselves. Just as a brief reminder, the Air Pollution Control Advisory Board is an advisory board to the Lincoln Lancaster County Board of Health and to the Health Department. As well, they advise you and they advise the Lancaster County Board of Commissioners. So they get to spread lots of advice around related to air pollution and air quality. So with that, I'll ask Tim and Jocelyn to please come up and they can introduce themselves.
Great,
Thanks.
thank you. Welcome. If you could just introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about your interest in the Air Pollution Control Advisory Board.
Sure. Chairperson Gaylor Baird. My name is Jocelyn Ludke. Do I need to state my address?
Yes, why not?
7610 Star Street, Lincoln, Nebraska. And I'm being nominated for the Air Pollution Control Advisory Board. It's something that I have an interest in professionally, and also just being a citizen of the great city of Lincoln, Nebraska. I wanted to give back to my community by serving on some kind of board. My education, I think, fits well with this. I have a law degree with a concentration in environmental studies, a bachelor's degree in environmental studies, and also associate's degree in business. And I've worked for the past 6 years with the Nebraska legislature, not doing environmental work. I'm doing transportation and telecom committee legal counsel and health and human services committee legal counsel. So there's also the public health aspect of this board that interests me there. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Any questions? Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Welcome.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Tim Schultz. Address is 2806 O'Shea Drive here in Lincoln. I currently work for Archer Daniels Midland here in Lincoln. My background, chemical engineering degree, about 8 or 9 years as a process engineer, and then the last 7.5 years as an environmental coordinator for the facility. Over that time, I've worked with the department on various things, obtaining air permits, modifying permits, working with inspectors to increase efficiency for their own inspections. When asked, I thought it was a good opportunity to give back in some degree. So if you have any questions.
Any questions? All right, well, thank you both for being willing to commit your time and service to Lincoln.
Sir,
Go ahead, please. Yes, name and address on the form. Thank you. Is Kim Phelps here? She's being appointed to the Star Trans. Oh, he is. Pardon me. Please come forward. That happens to me all the time, by the way.
Good afternoon. My name's Kim Phelps, and I'm being nominated to serve on the StarTran Advisory Board. This would be my second outing on the StarTran Advisory Board. I served on that until 2013, a couple of terms. Currently, I work at the University of Nebraska. I've been there 33 years in the Business and Finance Office. And as you know, there is considerable interest in having a great relationship between StarTran and the university because of the transportation needs of our students and faculty and staff. I have 3 degrees from the university, and I guess that's about all I can tell you about about my background. My address is 1620 Brighton Avenue here in Lincoln, and the things that I've been witnessing from the newspaper and other accounts tell me that there's a lot of very promising future ahead for the transit system here in Lincoln, and I'm just glad to be a part of it.
Great, thank you. Any questions?
Just a quick comment. Thanks, Dr. Phelps, for your continued interest. That's one thing when you've served on a board for a long period of time, but when you come back, that says something even more. So thanks very much for this, and hopefully we do have some promising days ahead.
Great, very welcome.
Mickey Esposito, Director of Public Works and Utilities. I don't want to underscore how influential this man has been in public transit for many, many centuries, for decades. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Sorry about that, Kim.
Touch my hair up, won't I?
Wow. Maybe I'm aging both of us. I don't know. But I do want to say what an honor it is to have him part of this board again and to have his influence and his support and service. So thank you for letting me pop up here and embarrass you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks.
All right. I think seeing no more appointees, are there any other folks who'd wish to testify on any items on the consent agenda? All right, seeing none, Teresa, please call the next item.
All right, if not, we can vote on these items. Item 1 through 3 were introduced by Raybold.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded by Roy. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Camp,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Eskridge,
Yes.
Fellers,
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Lamb,
Yes.
Raybold.
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Items 5 and 11 through 15 were introduced by Camp,
So moved.
Second?
Seconded by Jane. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Camp,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Eskridge,
Yes.
Fellers,
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Lamb,
Yes.
Raybold.
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Next then is our public hearing liquor resolutions. Those giving testimony are asked to come forward, raise their right hand for the clerk to administer the oath. After the oath, witnesses shall state their names and addresses. I'll call items 19 and 20. They are the application of Method Cycles and Craft House for a Class C liquor license at 416 South 11th Street, along with the related manager application of Randy Kinney.
Welcome, gentlemen, and if you could go ahead and state your names and address and take care of the paperwork afterwards, we'd be grateful.
My name is Bob Krieger. I'm the attorney for the applicant. My business address is 1630 K Street here in Lincoln, and I also have Mr. Randy Kinney present to testify on behalf of the applicant and his license.
I'm Randy Kinney. My address is 9820 Hollow Tree Drive, Lincoln, Nebraska.
Okay, why don't you guys tell us a little bit about the application here?
Would
with
you
Method-
raise your right hand?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth as you verily believe it to be?
I do.
Thank you.
All right, now, can you tell us a little bit about your application for Method Cycles and
Great.
Craft House?
We've got a small shop over on at 416 South 11th Street, and we're excited. It's a nice little shop. We'll have about 4 to 6 people that'll be working there with us. The entire back half of the shop is set up for bicycles. I've been riding myself for the last 7-8 years and just got more and more into riding bicycles. There's a nice bike path that goes right in front of the shop, and we're not too far from the east-west thoroughfare. And then in the front of the shop, we've got coffee, very nice coffee that we bring in the morning, and then we plan to have a craft beer available in the afternoon and evenings. So nothing too outrageous. Just want to have a nice shop where we can attract folks that want to come in and enjoy high quality bicycles, coffee, or craft beer.
Okay, any questions? Carl?
Yes, thanks for being here.
Yes.
And You weren't here before, but this business was here before,
It
a
was.
couple of years ago, maybe?
Maybe
year?
only a year ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Were you affiliated with that, or are you new with this?
I had known the people that had brought it in before, and so we purchased the business from them when the liquor license didn't go through at that point.
Okay,
And have taken ownership of it, my wife and I have.
excellent. Glad you did. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thanks.
All right, would anyone else like to speak to this item? Seeing none, please call the next item.
All right, next are items 21 and 22, the application of Super C for a Class D liquor license at 4445 South 70th Street and the related manager application of Joel Larson. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth as you verily believe it to be?
I do.
Thank you.
Jessica Greenwald, business address 800 Lincoln Square, Suite 800. I'm the attorney for the applicant. Applicant is a convenience store operator that has been operating in Lincoln for over 25 years. They have recently submitted their application to the council for review for a convenience store they are purchasing on South 70th Street. Happy to answer any questions that you may have, and the manager and owners of the location are also present if you'd like to answer any, I'd like them to answer any questions for you.
Any questions? All right, thank
Thank
you
you.
for being here. Would anyone else like to testify on this item? All right, please call the next item, Teresa.
All right, next are items 23 and 24, application of Gray Whale Sushi and Grill for a Class I liquor license at 129 North 10th Street, Suite 112, as well as the related manager application. Did you raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth as you really believe it to be?
Yes.
Thank you. Just state your name and address.
Yes, my name is Di Xia Wu, and address 129 North 10th Street, Suite 112. That's been my first time to doing this, so I'm trying to open a Japanese restaurant, the Sushi Great Whale and Girl, and I will try to do my best for this and do a different kind of sushi to the Lincoln, Nebraska. Yeah, I'm happy to.
Thank you for coming down. Any questions from council? John?
Yes, Ms. Wu, would you describe exactly where at this address she'll be, because it's a larger building?
It's down the 129 North 10th Street, the Grandman's, in that building, first floor.
First floor?
Yeah.
So
It's near the Blue Orchard.
near the Blue Orchard?
Yeah, just the neighbor.
Neighbor? Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, just, when do you open?
We plan to own in March.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for coming down today.
Yeah, thank you.
Good luck.
Thanks.
Would anyone else like to speak to this item? Okay, please call the next item, Teresa.
All right, next is item 25, application of Small Town Bar, Inc., doing business as Rosie Sports Bar and Grill to expand its Class I liquor license with the addition of Suite 100, measuring approximately 51 feet by 75 feet at 1501 Center Park Road, Suites 200 and 300.
Correct.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth as you verily believe it to be?
I do.
Thank you.
Ryan Rosensteel, 2701 Shelley Circle, Lincoln, Nebraska.
Welcome. Can you tell us a little bit about this expansion?
I already have 2/3 of the building. Now I have all of the building, so it just makes sense to keep going. So this is just to extend it to another 3,000 square feet for my liquor license.
Any questions from the council?
Plan to take over the pen?
I don't want to.
All right. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you for coming down today. I appreciate
Thank
your
you.
time. Would anyone else like to testify on this item? All right. I think
Madam
that's-
Chair, I'd move approval of items
My
19
different
through
license.
25.
Second.
Moved by John and seconded by Roy. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Next then are public hearing resolutions. Item 26 is directing submittal to the qualified electors of the city a proposed charter amendment amending Article 9, Sections 25, 25A, 26, and 26A of the charter relating to the city annual and biennial budgets.
Cindy?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. We are scheduled for public hearing today, which will continue, and at the end of public hearing, I actually have a substitute resolution that I'll be placing on file. I've already given to the clerk, and we'll be moving that the matter be put on the pending list.
Can you just clarify what you passed out just now? Is
Yes,
the-
I just passed out to council a copy of the the resolution to amend, which is, I put on file with the clerk.
Oh, thank you.
Did
And do you
everyone
have
get a
couple more
copy?
No, 2 more. Thank you. All right. Thank you. So, at this point, do we need any further action on your item, or we'll just?
No, I don't think we need any action until after public
Okay.
hearing.
Would anyone else like to speak to this item? All right.
Okay, then
I think we have Jane coming up.
Jane Kinsey, Watchdogs with Lincoln Government. We need this ballot measure in order to have a balance of power in Lincoln, Nebraska between the administrative and the council, i.e. legislative branch. Our Constitution of the United States calls for balance of powers, and this is appropriate to follow the U.S. Constitution. Democracy is not efficient, but it is the best form of government in which the people have the chance to say what they want and to confront their legislators or people that they have voted into office. So we believe this adds to the democratic principle, and therefore we are for this being placed on the ballot.
Would anyone else like to speak to this item?
Mary Beauchamp, League of Women Voters of Lincoln and Lancaster County. And I attended the earlier session at 1 o'clock when the budget process was discussed. And I do want to comment that we are very pleased at the League that the discussion of compromise, collaboration, communication, and finding a way to do this through either resolution or ordinance. And we see that as very positive. And the discussion that I heard at 1 o'clock, I was pretty impressed with how things went. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak to this item? Okay. Please call the next item.
Madam Chair.
Oh, sorry, Cindy.
Yes, thank you. I would move that this be placed on pending with no date certain stated. And I just wanted the public in this body to know that through the process of working with staff and visiting with individuals, and I've had an opportunity to visit with a lot of groups and individuals through this whole process, and I like the discussion that's going on. So I'm placing it on pending so that this discussion can continue.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you.
Moved by Cindy and seconded by Roy. Further discussion? So Jane.
So Cindy, I do appreciate the continued dialogue on this charter amendment that you have introduced and your continued work on it. I guess my question to you is it your intent to really redirect it to the Charter Revision Commission as well, so that they will have an opportunity to weigh in and work with you and continue to give you their input or feedback on some positive changes? Or tell us a little bit about your thoughts.
No, that's not my intention.
Any further discussion? Trent?
I appreciate what Cindy's doing here. There are some discussions around both a resolution that would change the budget schedule. We started that today at 1 o'clock. I think that's incredibly healthy. There are also some discussions on what could go to a charter revision committee that are ongoing, and I think to set this aside and put it on pending, so that we can see those discussions through and maybe see a product come up, after we get back from, the 2-week break that we'll have here. I think we're moving in the right direction where everybody could be happy with something that's coming through. And I appreciate Cindy, and the discussions that many of us have had on this issue, and a positive resolution that we can move forward with.
Anyone else? And I'll just echo my colleagues and say I really appreciated our discussion of the budget process timeline. It seems like we've been looking for some common ground, a place where we have a soft landing where people can share a common goal of getting more information to the council about the budget earlier in the process so that we can analyze and make more informed recommendations about what we'd like to see for the city going forward into the future. So that was a very productive discussion we had during a pre-council, and appreciate everyone's collaboration and presence there earlier today. All right, please call the roll on the, or do we need to vote on the roll on the motion to put this on pending?
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Fellers? Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Next then is item 27, ordering alley repaving district number 50 constructed from 16th to 17th Street between G and H Streets.
Susie Philippi, Public Works Engineering Services. This resolution, as clerk stated, is for the alley that runs from 16th to 17th between G and H. The alley is actually behind Ferguson and the Kennard House. There are 9 parcels and 5 owners. The estimated cost is $98,000, which would come to about $163 per frontage foot. The council passed an ordinance to create this district this past October. Since that time, we've obtained the required majority of owners in favor of the district, and all the formal petitions have been reviewed and okayed by our law department. If this resolution is passed, the engineering services will design the project, put it out for bid, and then construct the project. If by any chance the bids come in over 25% of our estimates, we'll meet again with the owners and give them options at that time. After completion and assessment of the project, the property owner has up to 20 years to pay this assessment. And we have worked with this neighborhood and have had several meetings with them already. They're a great bunch to work with. All of them seem to be very optimistic about how we should go forward with this. Again, they have been wonderful to work with, and we are looking forward to being able to go forward with the project. Any questions?
John?
Yes, Ms. Phelps, my understanding is this would totally be paid by the property owners adjacent
Correct.
to the
There would-
alley, so no city funds.
There would be no subsidy by the city on this. It'd be totally on the property owners.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Carl?
Yes, and the work would be completed this year, or when do you anticipate that?
We don't know for sure, because part of it would be when the design would actually be done, when the bids would go out. This is a little trickier area because there are 2 arterial streets, 16th, 17th. We would like to do it in between legislative sessions because of all the parking, and so we don't have a definitive if it would go forward, when it would be completed, or when construction would be.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Would anyone else like to testify on this item?
I'm Caleb Strait with the State Building Division, 1526 K Street. I would like to echo what the engineering services has just presented to you. We're in favor of it just because of the state of the alley. It's beyond the point where we believe it's reasonable practice to keep patching it just because we're seeing subgrade failures, and it's just time to fix it right. So we're in favor of it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? Okay, please call the next item.
All right, next is item 28, Comp Plan Conformance 16011, approving an amendment to the Lincoln Center redevelopment plan to add the 1222 P Street mixed-use redevelopment project to include the construction of 2 additional stories over a portion of the existing 3-story structure, along with demolition, reconstruction, and rehabilitation of the existing 3 stories on property generally located at 1222 P Street and a portion of the adjacent alley and right-of-way.
Good afternoon. I'm Dallas McGee with the City Urban Development Department. This is an amendment to the Lincoln Center redevelopment plan that will allow for the redevelopment of the building known as 1222 P Street. I've got a picture of it that you may recognize it from the picture once it gets up. It looks much the same as it did 100 years ago. It's changed very little. So I think we are, when we're working with the developer, which is Brick and Mortar Construction, they are going to be renovating the building and adding 3 new floors to the building. The project area that we would like to create does show the building itself. It's the only private property that would be included in the project area. We would include the alley behind the building and the right-of-way of P Street in front of the building. So it does not include any other private property. This renovation would allow for construction of both residential and commercial development on the property. And we have representatives of the developer here that can speak to that in more detail, but I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. Carl.
Well, I had missed the alley, so I'm interested in that. We just had an alley issue, and this alley has issues. So is that what the intent is, to help out that alley?
I think what we'd like to do when we put these project areas together is include the adjacent right-of-way where possible. There may be utilities, there may be issues that impact the alley. We're not anticipating anything at this point, but if there are, it would be included in the area, so we would be able to do something in the alley if needed.
Other questions for Dallas? John and then Jane?
Yes, Mr. McGee, as this proceeds, what further city participation, and in particular, are you anticipate tax increment financing? And
We are anticipating tax increment financing. The creation of the project area would enable a project area from which tax increment financing could be generated and could be spent.
Jane?
Yes.
Dallas, when you mentioned, when we just briefly discussed the alley, is it under consideration for it to be repaved?
That is not something that we have discussed at this point. It's something we could certainly look at, but repaving alleys does get rather expensive for a project of this size.
We see the generic list of potential uses of the tax increment financing. Do you have any sense of what they might be utilized in this particular location more specifically?
I think the developer could probably talk to that in more specifics than I could, but it would be very traditional uses that we've used on many other projects before.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm right-handed, I'm going to use this. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the council. My name is Tom Houston. My address is 233 South 13th Street, Suite 1900, here in Lincoln, on behalf of Brick and Mortar LLC, which is the owner of this building at 1222 P Street. With me today is Matt Stricker, who is the principal of Brick and Mortar LLC. Brick and Mortar is the owner of this property at 1222 P Street and has a unique opportunity for redevelopment. This property is really the last remaining property that hasn't been renovated or redeveloped on that north side of P Street between 12th and 13th Street. What I have on the overhead really is the The site plan, obviously the city has made a major investment in P Street a few years ago. We see continued investment by the private sector in P Street because of that, I believe. And this project would go along with that concept. This project itself would involve, the primary expense that we're looking at is the project would retain the first 20 feet of the structure, and the balance of the existing structure would be demolished. Thereafter, the building would be reconstructed and 3 stories would be added to the building. There will be approximately 4,000 square feet of retail on the first floor with, and we would be able to retain the historic nature of the facade. You'll see on the overhead that this is the existing building, and would retain that front facade with the new structure above it. The site plan and the elevation drawing has been to the Urban Design Committee on 2 separate occasions with a lot of comment, a lot of discussion, and ultimately approval from the Urban Design Committee. In addition to the retail, the new structure will add 29 dwelling units, predominantly comprised of studio dwellings and 1-bedroom dwellings at market rate rental project. So the issue in front of you today is really the amendment to the redevelopment plan and its amendment to the Lincoln Center redevelopment plan to determine whether or not it's consistent with the general plan of development for the city. We looked at 2 documents for that consistency analysis. The first of which is the comprehensive plan, commonly known as L Plan 2040. The comprehensive plan certainly shows a commitment to a strong downtown. It advocates for the increased choices for housing options in downtown, encourages the mixed-use development, and also has a focus on new housing and new dwelling units in downtown. I think there was a stated goal of 3,000 dwelling units. This will add 29 to that mix. The second document that should be examined for this, the question in front of you, is really the downtown master plan, which again also emphasizes mixed use with housing and retail. It advocates for the vertical mix of that housing and above retail, and also focuses on the P Street corridor as a major retail corridor. This site will help activate this space. It's currently not very active, and I think it will activate it with the retail use on the first floor level. The project itself will involve an investment of approximately $4 million, of which we anticipate and project the tax increment financing component of approximately $470,000. The vast majority of that expense we anticipate to be used for really the demolition of the existing structure to accommodate the new growth. Our schedule moving forward is we anticipate we'd be back in front of you within about 3 weeks with a redevelopment agreement. We're working on that as we speak. And then construction would proceed soon thereafter so that the vertical construction could occur this summer of 2017. And with that, happy to try to answer any questions that you may have.
Jane.
Tom, can you discuss why was the alley included in this redevelopment agreement if it doesn't sound like any improvements are going to be made to the alley?
Yeah, we don't anticipate any improvements to the alley, but it's always wise in the plan, and I agree with the philosophy, to always include the public right-of-way adjacent to the redevelopment projects, because we don't know precisely what utility improvements may be required. So I think the inclusion of the right-of-way creates the possibility that additional utility improvements could be possible. We don't anticipate resurfacing the alley right now. Obviously, the property directly to the west was the Swanson Russell redevelopment project, which did not make any improvements to the redevelopment or to the alley itself. And I think directly behind this property, we don't anticipate those improvements either.
So if there's are issues that are discovered, will you be coming back for an increase in the TIF allowance of $470,000, or it is what it is?
I think it is what it is. And we size the TIF based upon the projected valuation of the property, and just because we have increased costs doesn't really necessarily mean that we have increased TIF. So that's why we're trying to keep a handle on that.
Trent.
In addition to going out in the alley, you're going even further into almost the midpoint of Peace Street. We've done a lot of work and improvement in those areas. What's the strategy around going in the street there?
Again, since Peace Street has been renovated and resurfaced, we do not believe there's going to be any required public improvements to the right-of-way within Peace Street. And you're right, the project area does include the right-of-way out to the center line of Peace Street. But again, we just include it as a matter of course within the project area for redevelopment plan purposes.
Okay, and then Peace Street, busy corridor, lots of businesses there, and this is maybe not a question for this particular item, but thinking in the future, I mean, construction vehicles probably using that area, is there some strategy that could kind of alleviate that and keep them off the street, or?
I think that the plan is to really stage from the alley.
Okay.
And to avoid the conflict with the P Street traffic to the extent possible. There probably are occasions where we'll have some conflict, but the primary staging is intended to be at the alley.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? John?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Houston. And some of this may be for Mr. Stricker as well, but looking at the alley again, if my recollection is straight, if you put that in this redevelopment plan, say there was an adjacent area off of Q Street that wanted to have something done, as I recall, you can't include it in another redevelopment plan.
Well, the public right-of-way can be included in multiple redevelopment project areas. So if there's a Q Street property that backs up to this alleyway, that right-of-way can still be included in that Q Street project to the north. I think the community development law would support that.
I wasn't aware of that. Thank you. And then secondly, and again, this may be for Mr. Stricker, but when you look at some of the ADA requirements, this is a beautiful building. It kind of is split there with a lower level exposed.
One of the challenges, it's a split entry, right?
Would there be any information on that, either you or Mr. Stricker?
Well,
how that's going to be solved?
Obviously, the intent is that retail would be at the grade level of P Street. So that's part of the reconstruction process to eliminate that split entry. And the facade is being retained as a facade, but there would be an entryway probably 10-foot recessed. So the reconstruction process is intended to retain the facade, but really create the first floor finish space at grade level.
It seems like that would defeat the lower level, which has windows as well as first floor. Anyway, okay, thank you.
There's multiple governmental codes that require compliance, obviously.
Mr. Houston, thank you. It's nice to see the facade being maintained, and I know there was, you said, discussion at the Urban Design Committee, some of which was in our packet.
Yes.
But only from one meeting. And can you just explain for us briefly how the concerns of the committee and particular members who wanted to have another look, what you did to address those concerns?
The first facade that was really the upper level. The lower level facade has not really changed, but the first, but some of the fenestration really in the lower level has been changed, but the upper facade was more symmetrical, and the Urban Design Committee suggested to really offset it and make and differentiate it from the historic facade to make it asymmetrical. And that's why the design that ultimately was recommended and approved by the Urban Design Committee has this asymmetrical design. So that and the new stories that are being added are being recessed further back from the older facade. That was part of the discussion that happened in Urban Design Committee.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to testify on this item? All right. Seeing none, please call the next item.
All right, next is item 29, approving a professional services agreement between the city and Iterus, Inc. to provide NEPA evaluation and documentation for the North 27th Street Adaptive Signal Control Technology Project.
Good afternoon, Lonnie Berkland, Manager of Traffic Engineering, Public Works Department. This is simply our professional services agreement with Iterus, Inc. To provide the necessary documentation, systems engineering, write-up, preliminary and final design, and they'll be on board through final acceptance and testing of an adaptive signal control technology. That's a mouthful. ASCT is our acronym for that. Basically, it's a new signal system on the North 27th Street corridor, all the way from O Street north to I-80. This was a project that was started some years ago in the planning phases. For those of you that remember Virendra Singh, who's no longer with us, we competed for and obtained 90-10 funding through NDOR, the safety fund. So it's a great project, and we're excited to get rolling finally and plow ahead. So with that, I'd entertain any questions.
John?
Yeah. Speaking of funding, Mr. Berkland, so the non-city portion of 1.62 million, that's the NDOR funds?
Yep.
Or?
Yep, that's the federal funding. Yep.
So the Fed goes through the state?
Yes,
Department of Roads
exactly.
and it
Yep.
does. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Can you speak a little bit about timeline? We've had this item come before us in various stages, and it's a big, expensive, incredibly sophisticated kind of piece of technology. Can you just give us a high-level overview of the timeline and what this will mean for the city and for people who will enjoy its benefits?
Sure. Well, if you're familiar with, hopefully you are, with our Greenlight Lincoln initiatives, those are things where we're fixing equipment out on the signal system and on the street network and basically coming up with new detection systems and new time of day plans. And when I say that, I mean new timing plans that will operate during discrete periods of the day. So AM, noon, PM, peak hour. The intent of these types of adaptive systems, which have really been around for almost a couple decades, but they've really picked up pace the last 3 to 5 years, is that they do a lot of that technical work for you. In other words, they have some algorithms where you place them in the street at our field controllers, and they basically calculate vehicle densities and amounts, and they attempt to dynamically change the signal timings as folks arrive at intersections. So they're sort of geared towards corridors and roadways where there is quite a bit of variability in traffic. So with all the commercial activity on North 27th Street, we see that as a great opportunity. This will be the first one that the city of Lincoln has done. Omaha is about in the exact same status that we are right now, with a couple corridors that they're trying to get going on. So there's about 3,000 intersections in the U.S. that are currently running these systems, so about less than 1% of all signals, but we'll see how it goes, and hopefully it's a great thing, and if it does, we'll look at maybe chasing some more federal funding to do some more. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else like to speak to this item? All right, please call the next item.
All right, next I'll call items 30 and 31 together. They're approving a development and conditional zoning agreement between the city and John D. Zakovec and Judith L. Zakovec, husband and wife, developers, to assure that the developer will develop that portion of Lot 1, Woodlawn West, as represented, should the property be rezoned to H3 pursuant to the developer's application for change of zone 16023, which is item 31. And this is for property generally located at 6625 Northwest 48th Street.
Madam Chair, members of the council, Mark Hunziker appearing on behalf of John and Judy Zakovec. This is a case which I believe represents substantial regulatory overreach. As to the agreement that's on your agenda as item 30, we have no intention of signing that. And the reason is that it is unnecessary, and I'll tell you why in a second. On its face, this change of zone is a complete laydown. It's a no-brainer. What you're seeing here in this photograph, if I can get it up. Yep, okay. We have an area here that's zoned H3 that is owned by John and Judy, and it's in here. The other area that is also zoned H3 is also owned by John and Judy, and the area that we're proposing to rezone is this little narrow strip which was accidentally left out of a previous change of zone, and this little strip down in here which lies between what we have done in the way of surveying a future minimum flood corridor along the west side of the property and along the south side of the property, which is right in here. No reasonable person would suggest that this area would be developed for residential use between the flood corridor and this storage facility. To give you a little bigger overview of this area, this is how it exists today. The storage units on this property. Again, the flood storage corridor runs along the west side of the property and down along the south side. And all we're trying to do is to bring these together, to bring the zoning districts so that they match up, and to and to add to it just a little bit, that portion which is between the flood corridor and the existing H3 development. To try and put that in perspective in a comp plan context, this is an area which is outside the future urban limits of the city as of 2040. This is John and Judy's property right in here. There are three corners of the intersection of 48th, Northwest 48th and Highway 34, which are shown as commercial development in the future comp plan. All of them are outside the future urban limits of 2040. So to suggest that we ought to be trying to, or ought to have to give up access points on Northwest 48th Street and dedicate permanent access easements to the city and to future owners of property in that area is absolutely absurd. We don't need it, we won't do it, and we would ask you to please approve this small change of zone without the condition of entering into the agreement that's attached to the resolution. I'd try to answer any questions you might have.
Jane.
Mark, didn't the planning commissioners support those conditions that were recommended by the planning
No, they did
department?
not. They deleted from their recommendation the requirement that we sign this agreement before we get scheduled on the agenda, which was also outrageous.
Did you have an opportunity to go back to the planning department and work out this difference of opinion?
We've been working on this project now for several months.
Mm-hmm.
We started out by the planning department asking us to define the minimum flood corridor, which, by the way, is not a zoning concept whatsoever. It's a subdivision concept. We are not subdividing. We have no intention of subdividing, but the planning department insisted that we define that future minimum flood corridor, even though by the time 2040 rolls around, or 2050, whenever it is we have sewer and water and availability to develop this ground, those standards may change. We went ahead and spent money on the engineers to go out and define that flood corridor, thinking that doing so would at least satisfy that urge, only to find out that in addition to that, the planning department was asking us to give up at least one of our two access points onto Northwest 48th Street, not knowing which one. And when talking to the Public Works Department, they have no plans yet for Northwest 48th Street and couldn't tell us which one was likely to be asked to be relinquished so that we could plan around that. We just don't think it's a reasonable requirement to ask somebody to give a blank check to the city to say, you can take one of our access points whenever you want it, essentially, and to not be able to even plan as to which one it's going to be because they don't know.
If someone from planning department can come up and talk about this a little bit, okay. Or John has
Are there
questions.
further
for Mark.
questions for
Mr.
Mr.
Hunziker, then just to get this straight, then, you're asking us to vote against both measures?
No, I'm asking you to either not vote or to vote against the first one and to approve the second one. To approve the change of zone, do not approve the resolution for approving the agreement because we don't intend to sign it.
Any other questions for Mr. Hunziker? I do have a question for you, because
Okay.
the language that the Planning Commission changed to, it's a little, I mean, it's not that far off from what the condition originally was, so I guess I want to give you an opportunity to speak to that. The condition of approval did read that the City Council public hearing will be scheduled after the city receives the signed development and conditional zoning agreement. And
that
then they changed it to the Planning Commission is recommending of approval of the zoning subject to a signed development and conditional zoning agreement. How do you see those two as different? Maybe we'll have staff speak to that too, but I want you to have a
I
chance.
could be wrong, but my recollection was that they deleted that requirement. And if that's the way the minutes read, that's an error in my opinion. And frankly, it doesn't matter, because we're not going to sign that agreement. That agreement is outrageously overreaching, and we are not going to sign it. John would prefer not to have this rezoning than to sign that agreement, and I think he's right.
Any other questions for Mark? All right, maybe it's some questions for the planning that Jane wanted to ask.
So I guess this is for David. If you wouldn't mind coming up. I happened to attend the Planning Commission hearing on this subject, and I know it was a little bit confusing, but I did think that the planning commissioners had substantiated some requirement, and perhaps you could tell me where it landed.
Yeah, the action taken by the, excuse me, the Planning Commission was to remove the requirement for a signed agreement before it came to council, but not the changes, did not change the conditions of the approval.
And did you have a chance, or did you have a dialogue between Mr. Hunziker and his clients about the reasoning why this condition is important for the development or rezoning of this property, or?
Yeah, there was quite a bit of dialogue leading up to the Planning Commission hearing, and I'm going to ask Steve Henriksen to come up. He was the lead on this, and so I'm going to, he is a better source of the details of that discussion moving forward.
Steve Henriksen with the Planning Department.
And so I guess, Steve, if you could address some of the concerns that were identified by the planning commissioners and the planning department on why these conditions are relevant to this parcel.
Sure. When the applicant came in, one of the initial reasons for the request was not only the fact that there's this little narrow area that was a gap between one H3 zoning and later H3 zoning, and so clearly we needed to correct that gap, but that the applicant was also using this house here as a part of the office for the self-storage today, and it was actually residentially zoned, not commercially zoned, so they needed to get that fixed, and that certainly made sense to us that the house would be a part of the use. And then there was some discussion that the applicant also wanted to, at some point, come forward and build some additional self-storage buildings. And we said, well, we should really find a logical boundary for that end of the commercial use here. The comp plan does not encourage the expansion of commercial uses outside of the city limits. So we asked the applicant, could you identify there's a drainage way along here that had been moved at some point in the future? If it was a minimum flood corridor and at some point in the future you subdivided your land, you wouldn't be able to fill that in. So that might make a good logical boundary to the change of zone. So the applicant then went forward, identified that boundary, showed their concept plan of how the site might redevelop or might develop with additional uses. And we said that made sense as a logical boundary. And the applicant then showed us a plan, the applicant's engineer, as how do they wish to subdivide this property in the future. And their plan was to subdivide it in lots that were 10 acres or larger. And by state law, you can do lots of 10 acres or larger without having to go through a preliminary plat process. So typically, as Mr. Hunziker stated, we would address the access through a preliminary plat process. They'd come in, they'd show their streets, they'd show how the property was going to be developed. But the applicant stated to us instead they were going to do 10-acre lots. They didn't want to go through the process. So we said, well, since your application is not only including the orange area that is to kind of clean up the existing boundary, but is expanding the commercial use, we thought at the very least this made sense to be the opportunity to address how you might access the rest of the property someday down the road when it develops. And so the applicant's engineer put together on the drawing showed the access easement, the common access easement, the public access easement. That public access easement was going to fall over the existing driveway that was on the site today. So today that was the existing. And the access easement was basically to show how some future lots may get access to Northwest 48th Street in the future. So we had that worked out, we thought, with the applicant. So we went forward with our standard condition, which is typically the applicant signs the zoning agreement. We then schedule it with the city council, and you get both the change of zone and the zoning agreement. And that's how we were proceeding. The applicant let us know that he changed his mind, decided he didn't want to provide the access easements. It went then forward to the Planning Commission. We completely agreed that since the applicant didn't want to sign the agreement, that condition should be revised so that the Planning Commission was asked, do you think these conditions are appropriate or not? They recommended to you that the conditions that they sign the zoning agreement were appropriate, and so that was their recommendation 9-0. That was what was reflected in their minutes. And so that's why the recommendation is still to you to move forward with it, but with those conditions that address the type of access things. And these are items that we had discussed with Public Works, including the fact that per access management policy, you wouldn't have two driveways on an arterial street. And yes, Public Works doesn't know which of these driveways would be removed. And the current use of the property is self-storage, and so Public Works was fine with the fact that the applicant would have the two driveways today, but was trying to say somewhere down the road, particularly since this zoning agreement doesn't limit the uses. So this being along Highway 34, if the applicant redevelops it into a convenience store or a fast food restaurant and the number of trips go up significantly, it would be appropriate at that time, perhaps, then to say, well, one of these driveways is causing an issue, and we might want to have one of those driveways removed per access management. So that was another one of the conditions that was recommended, is somewhere down the road, perhaps the Public Works would then look to have one of the driveways removed to better control the access on the site. We're not trying to remove the access to the existing building. It's a self-storage. It's a very low traffic generator. But since there's no limits on the H3 zoning, if you grant the additional 2.25 acres, the area itself is going to be nearly 10 acres in terms of the commercial zoning. It could, somewhere down the road, being on Highway 34, have a greater impact.
So is it standard and customary for the planning department and the planning commissioners to fully state these restrictions? Should that use change in the future, it's important for the owners to understand that one of the two accesses would go away, but it is to be determined at a future date should the use change. But is that the standard and customary language that these type of developments all go through?
Yeah, in a lot of use permits or preliminary plats or PUDs, the developer would show the access today and would state, okay, this access and that access point are going to be removed at a certain point in the future, and the access consolidated into one access point. That's very typical with commercial development. Of course, at this point, they're not in those normal tools we have, a PUD or a use permit or a preliminary plat. So in those circumstances, when we haven't had it, there's been a zoning agreement that addresses those things instead.
Other questions? Roy?
If let's say we don't have this agreement, as the applicant has requested, and someday in the future they decide to go ahead and build a fast food restaurant like you suggested, would that occasion an opportunity to change the access at that time?
If they came in for the building permit and this lot here had been sold off separately, it's possible that at that point, if that lot still had both of the driveways, with a future access or future building permit, it's potentially possible that you could address the driveways at that point. Part of the challenge there would be then that since this property was split off separately with 10 acres, at some point in the future when the other property develops, that property would say, well, this first property is not giving me access to that property. I need my own access to Northwest 48th Street as well as the lot back here in the back when it subdivides somewhere down the road. It having no access through the other two properties to Northwest 48th would in turn come in and say, well, city, we think as we develop in an urban manner, you should give us access to Highway 34 because you didn't plan for any access onto Northwest 48th Street. That property currently has an access for the soil excavation and the farming that's going on the property. But again, according to our access management policy, we wouldn't necessarily want another access on Highway 34. Now, we're not asking them to give up any of their rights to Highway 34 with this application. We're simply saying we think it makes sense to have a common access easement here so that we can try to plan for down the road in terms of that, yes, these two properties somewhere in the future would share that one access point, other than us having a situation where we'd have to give both of them access.
Other questions? Okay, thank you very much. Mark, are you wanting to have rebuttal?
Absolutely.
Can I offer other people to testify just in case there are other people here? Are there any other folks who'd like to speak on this item? All right.
Will we have an opportunity to ask legal as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Ask legal staff.
Staff questions.
Once you're done.
Let him talk after you ask that question.
Oh, okay. Well, Jeff. Okay, so in order to avoid any confusion in my mind, I think, I'm not sure what action we're supposed to be taking. Oh, Rick, you're there. I was looking down, trying to figure out where I'm at. Okay, so,
There'd be no vote today.
well, there's no vote today. Okay. Well, then I guess,
I think what the issue really was is that the conditions for approval of the change of zone would be that it be subject to entering into the development conditional zoning agreement. You have that resolution to adopt that agreement today as drafted by the law department and with planning support. So that would be the issue. Do you approve, if Mr. Hunsker's not willing, client's not willing to sign this agreement, then we would prefer that that be signed if they're going to sign it ahead of the vote, or you say you don't want it and we don't need it, then you just approve the change of zone. But
okay, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Hunsaker?
I want to be very clear. There are no plans for utility extensions to this area before 2040. There is no plan to subdivide this property. There is no reason to subdivide this property. The conceptual lots that were shown were shown at the request of the planning department by the engineer at a point prior to the time I finally got involved in this project. All of that stuff about future subdivision and future access points and so forth is really just conjecture. And frankly, it's also not accurate. The suggestion that we might be requesting an access at some point in the future to Highway 34 is a moot point. There is already access to Highway 34. Yes, it does serve the soil excavation permit that is there, but it is an existing, pre-approved, unrestricted access to Highway 34, which was negotiated with the Department of Roads when Highway 34 was being widened. So it exists, and if there's need for access to that other property to the west or to the south from Highway 34, we've got it. We don't need to ask anybody. We have an unrestricted access. So all this talk about access to the property off of Highway 34 or off of Northwest 48th Street is really moot. We are not subdividing this property, have no intention of subdividing the property. In fact, John just told me today that he wants to be sure that even though he's got a couple of different parcels, one of which was acquired from the change in the alignment of Northwest 48th Street, to make sure that we can combine those all into one parcel, so that the entire farm, including that portion which is zoned H3 and being used for the storage facility, will be one parcel. Again, I will still want to go back and look at the language, look at the motion that was actually made, but the only condition to this change of zone was removed. The only condition in the staff report was that we sign the agreement, or that the public hearing will be scheduled after the city receives the signed development and conditional zoning agreement. And this is it. And I've deleted my editorial comment to that condition. But I will just say, we are under the impression that the Planning Commission approved this without that condition, meaning approval of the change of zone without that agreement. And we will not be signing that agreement. We would ask you to please approve the change of zone because it makes sense to do so.
Questions? I just want to ask, so I hear you saying there's no intention to subdivide, that's not your client's intent right now, but should the property, should something change, do you take issue with the idea of planning ahead to avoid conflicts that might occur to try and ward off? It's a lot harder to fix a problem once there are multiple access points than it is to deal with it in the present day. So can you just speak to that issue?
I take serious issue with the concept of trying to guess what that might mean. When we, again, here's the site as it exists today. And we have these two access points. The site, the area to the south is cut up by drainage ways. There's without a plan or any idea of where there might be future development, there's no way to know which, if either of these sites, or either of these access points ought to be closed. And if you know, it may be this one, it may be that one. Public Works was talking about, well, maybe someday we will realign Woodlawn Road to come over here and meet up with this southern one, when planning was telling us originally, well, you got to get rid of this one because it's too close for access management purposes. Nobody knows. We don't know. The staff doesn't know. It makes no sense for us to be granting access easements to the city of Lincoln, which have to be released in the event there's any change whatsoever. There's certainly no need for a 66-foot wide access easement to get access to a piece of property that really doesn't have a whole lot of potential for redevelopment in the first place. This is just asking for things because we can. And this time we're saying, no, you can't.
Carl.
There is a long-range plan to widen Northwest 48th Street all the way to Highway 34.
I think it's in the comprehensive plan to do that. I don't think anybody knows when that might happen. At least nobody in our meetings with Public Works was willing to volunteer a time.
It's a long ways off. Essentially, this land's in the county currently, so it would be.
Yes, it is. I mean, and it's a long, hard. It's a long way from sewer, and there are no plans to build it.
Okay.
So just because the city isn't asking for one or the other driveway to be removed today, they're saying have an easement and recognize that in the future this could be an issue. What is the practical implication of that request from the city to your client that makes it so objectionable?
Well, one of the things is that it requires that we dedicate a 30-foot wide public access easement on our property. We don't want the public on our property, for one thing. It requires a 66-foot wide common access easement in reference to earlier paragraphs in a form acceptable to the city. What that means is we want easements that will stay in place forever unless we give our consent to release them. And we have no idea whether they're going to be in the right place when the time comes. And we don't want to have to ask permission to undo those things sometime in the future if it needs to be done. And the fact that the city doesn't even know which access point it would like to remove tells me there's no need to give the city consent, that we will just give up one of those two access points whenever they tell us it needs to be given up.
Did you have a follow-up question for Rick?
I mean, these are things that are generally done in the subdivision process, which is my earlier point. This is not a subdivision. We are not trying to subdivide. We have no intention of subdividing. We've gone ahead and complied with the request to identify the minimum flood corridor, even though it's not a subdivision. It's a zoning issue. And again, had I been involved in the first place, we probably wouldn't have even done the minimum flood corridor.
John and Jane.
I wonder if Mr. Hunziker's client wanted to come up. I think it might be appropriate, although we...
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, it's John Zakovitz. I live at the, if you have that map of the one.
There you go.
Okay.
What's up?
I live at this house. I bought this property in 91. And if you remember, this was where the old pumpkin patch used to be. Okay. After 5 years of running that, I knew I wasn't going to be a lifelong, I'm not a people person. Okay? I know foreman. I don't know how to run a business like that, I should say. Anyway, I live here in this house. I had a heck of a time trying to get my house built because from here on down is floodplain. How can you build anything on a floodplain? So that's another thing that never got brought up. That's why I want to tell you from here and over there, everything down is floodplain. 20 years ago, the city promised me in 5 years I'll have city and water. 20 years ago when I moved in there. And in my house here, I have my own well, which is 1.5 gallons a minute. How many people would have want to build a house with that low a consumption in there? And so that's the only things that haven't been brought up, so I just wanted to add that.
Did you have a question, Jane, for Mark? Or?
For Rick, probably is it customary to put in a provisional condition of the easement should the property be subdivided, or is that understood in the crafting of the language, the condition that's already in place?
I think the issue was coming up was that a preliminary plat wasn't required because the other potential properties could be sold off by deed, which is over 10 acres inside, so you wouldn't have the ability to regulate at that point of time. And you don't want to have future buyers buying property that's landlocked and doesn't have access to a public street. I think at the testimony at the public hearing on from the Planning Commission, that Mark indicated, well, yes, when we sell the property, obviously we'll have to grant access to someone. Down the road, they'll have to define it then. I think our idea was let's see something now at the appropriate location so we felt that would be most attributable to it and resolve that today. As development comes in, we'd have the ability to come back and actually look at modifying those access points if they were inappropriate, but we wouldn't have that same right potentially down the road if we approved this without easements being granted ahead of time. And with respect to an earlier statement Mark made about the condition being deleted from the Planning Commission report, we'd agree that we couldn't hold this application hostage. That by saying you had to sign the agreement before the change of zone could come to the City Council was not permissible. And my recollection of the testimony at the staff report was that they were modifying that condition to say we're taking that off, but we're still recommending that the agreement be a condition of approval.
John?
Yeah, Mr. Pale, how do you respond to Mr. Hunziker's comment about granting easements when you really don't know if that's where utilities would run or what have you?
Those changes take effect a lot, and we do a lot of releases on other developments where people come in and they decide, the plat, the lots don't work, we redesign them, we replat them into different configurations, and we have to come back and we have to remove and delete easements at that point in time frequently. That's part of development going forward. You have an idea of what you might be looking at. We were shown a potential future site development of future lots that could be sold off of here, and based on those configurations, we identified what appeared to be an appropriate easement areas to ask easements to be granted over. If development occurs differently, I think obviously the city would be looking to work with a developer, and I think access easements is just going to be a one-party agreement between the city and the future developer, so it's a lot simpler release process than going through easements that might have numerous utility companies named as well. So it didn't seem like it would be onerous to modify conditions in the future if needed, but we would at least be safeguarding future owners and future property rights by requiring those easements at this time.
Wouldn't the desire by various utilities, city-owned or privately owned, really at that time dictate that something's got to be done, otherwise?
Well, they might dictate the location of electric or gas or water, but not access rights for where streets or transportation might move. So I think that would just strictly be between the city and the developer on those points.
Okay. Thank you. Mark, we've had more comments. If you'd like to come back up, you can have.
One, I mean, they're asking for a public access easement. Public access easements are the same things you have on every private roadway in the city. That means the public can drive in anytime they please. We are not going to give up a public access easement when we're not trying to subdivide and we don't have any intention to do so. If you really want to turn this simple little change of zone into something like that, we're not interested.
Okay, let's move on. Teresa, can you please call the next item?
Certainly. Item 32, Text Amendment 16013, amending Chapter 27.63 of the Lincoln Municipal Code relating to special permits by amending Section 27.63.685 to delete the access door location requirement and add exterior door opening requirements for a special permit for alcoholic beverages to be sold for consumption off premises in zoning districts B1, B3, H1, H2, H3, H4, I1, and I3, and repealing Section 27.63.685 as hitherto existing.
Madam Chair, members of the council, Mark Hunziker, appearing on behalf of Walgreens. The issue that this text amendment raises is the difference in treatment between B2 and B5 commercial areas and all others relative to the objective criteria of distance from protected uses for licensed premises versus public entrance. Why is it okay to have a liquor license premises 50 feet or less, there's no minimum in the B2 or B5, from protected uses in the B2 and B5, but nowhere else? If the distance to the public entrance is the standard in B2 and B5, why not in B1, B3, or H1? If that distance is important, if it can reasonably be said to create a meaningful protective buffer between the premises which sells the alcoholic beverages for consumption off premises, then it should apply to all zoning districts which permit such sales. As originally drafted and passed, this ordinance originally allowed the city council the discretion to reduce that 100-foot distance in individual cases. This proposal does not change provisions for the sale of alcohol for consumption on the premises, and arguably those establishments have a greater impact on abutting property due to patrons making noise in parking lots and so forth, and the likelihood of live entertainment or other music. Yet our ordinance today makes a distinction based on the zoning district. And I just want to give you a few examples. The first one, this is Piedmont Shopping Center. There's a restaurant that's located approximately here that is less than 50 feet from adjoining residential. I'm not aware of any problems. That's on sale, but it was approved only because a PUD was approved on the Piedmont Shopping Center for that reason. There was no real other reason to do it. Here you have, that's not the one, excuse me. This is the restaurant Isara at this location. This is about 18th and Pine Lake Road. Isara has on sale. It also has an outdoor courtyard in which people can eat and drink. And it is 50 feet, literally, from the back doors of these homes.
Mr. Hunziker, was from the back doors or from the lot line?
Excuse me, from the back side of the building to the lot lines. This is Ridge Point. This is 16th Street. This is residential. This is a townhome right here on the corner. The distance from that building, which contains I believe, could contain a liquor licensed establishment, 47 feet, 47 and a half feet. So you have all these areas that have less than 50 feet even, that are permitted to have on sale or off sale because they're zone B2 or B5, and yet you have there's other districts which cannot, simply because they're not zone B2 or B5, they're zone B1, B3, B4, or B5, H1, H2, H3. This is an aerial of the corner of 14th and Superior, the Walgreens store right here. This is what it looked like before it was zone B2 and how it, and unable to sell alcohol. This is what it looks like now that it's zone B2 and has the ability to sell alcohol, and in each case, it's 78 and 55 feet away from a city park on two sides. And the real reason we're here is this property at 48th and O. This property is 65 feet. This licensed premises, if you had one, would be 65 feet from the residential boundary to the south. And that residential boundary consists of a retaining wall about 10 feet tall. Now, the real question for you at this point is, what purpose of a setback is not served in this circumstance? What purpose of a 100-foot setback is, what purpose does 100 feet serve that this 65 feet with a 10-foot retaining wall does not? The fact is, none. And I'm sure there are others. The planning department has conjured up a way to scare you with something like 600 and some other locations that might be eligible for a liquor license if this is approved. The fact of the matter is that's nonsense. That map really doesn't tell you anything. And this ordinance is nearly, well, it doesn't serve the purpose intended. The original intent of this ordinance was simply anti-competitive. That purpose no longer exists, but it is serving a purpose of keeping businesses like the 48th and O Walgreens from being able to do a reasonable business at a reasonable location. And it's partly because the city council has deprived itself of the discretion to reduce these requirements. And all I'm trying to do with this one is to make it just as simple as it is today, make the requirement just as objective as it is today, and to make it a little more rational and fair across those zoning districts. I'll try to answer any questions you might have.
Questions? What, I have one. The 48th and O Walgreens that is in question for this particular event, it's gone in somewhat recently. It doesn't predate this policy. It went to that location after this policy was in place, correct?
Right.
Okay, thank you.
It went in also prior to the time Walgreens decided they wanted to be in the liquor business.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to speak to this item?
Hello. My name is Brandy Payne, and I'm the chair of the Open Harvest Grocery Board of Directors, located at 1618 South Street. I'm here representing the Board of Directors, management, staff, excuse me, the member owners and patrons of Open Harvest, including 1,031 who provided online signatures in support. We provided those to you in advance of this meeting, as well as those that signed locally in the store. We support this text amendment and respectfully request that you amend it with the express permission of Mr. Hunsaker to include the following language at the end of Section 1, subsection C. Quote, however, if there is a public street right-of-way between the licensed premises and the premises described in 1 or 2, the distance shall be the width of that public street right-of-way. I believe you received this request in advance as well, so hopefully you've had a chance to review it and consider it. We know the Planning Commission recommended denial, and we understand the concerns about amending this code. Frankly, as Mr. Hunsaker mentioned, we'd rather approach the city for a waiver to allow alcohol sales at this very specific location. However, that's not an option for us at this time. Therefore, it's necessary to amend this broader language, which does have a widespread effect on the city. However, this would be not only for our benefit, but for the benefit of other small, locally owned businesses that would like to be a part of older well-established areas of Lincoln, but cannot due to the constraints of this at this time. And the city does in fact have a history of enacting this broad language to specifically help local businesses. For example, when it allowed a text amendment change which decreased the requirements for a restaurant's physical location from that 100 feet, because it used to be the same, to 25 feet. This was a change that encouraged restaurants in older areas and then allowed them to get licenses to sell alcohol. The obvious distinction is that they would sell on-sale alcohol, we would be selling off-sale. I would argue, however, that allowing alcohol sales at the co-op and other similar businesses would provide far less of a risk to the surrounding areas. Our intention and expectation is that the patrons purchased closed alcohol with the expectation they will be imbibing in their own residences or at a bare minimum far away from the location. However, the express intent of allowing alcohol sales in a restaurant is that it's happening on-site. And realistically, most people are then leaving and driving through said neighborhoods to get back to their own home. So we would argue that this would not increase issues in the neighborhoods. Definitely not any more than that change did, which has already been approved. The City of Lincoln has made it a priority in the plan to support retention of existing businesses, to sustain the functionality of the core of the city. And we would argue that amending this code, which would allow, like I said, locally owned small businesses such as Open Harvest to maintain their presence in the core of the city is crucial. And right now, those setbacks make it very difficult. We've been around for over 40 years and at the current location since the early 90s. However, I'm sure you've noticed competition growth over the last 5 years has increased dramatically. And we're struggling. It's hit us hard. One of the things that we've heard over and over again from our member owners and our patrons is that being a one-stop shopping experience is crucial to their continued support of the store. As it stands now, we can't compete with other stores that allow consumers to purchase their groceries as well as their alcohol for an entire meal experience. So without this option, we're losing not only current business, but it's making it much harder to draw new customers into this location. We're located in a great neighborhood and provide the only walkable grocery option for those in the surrounding areas within a margin. We provide food resources for the surrounding businesses. The only grocery option along the South Street corridor for only over a mile either direction. If we were allowed the option to be a one-stop grocery, it would allow people in our neighborhood to work, live, and shop within biking and walking distance. Thus, as the comprehensive plan states, reducing the energy demands and harmful emissions of vehicle trips, again, all priorities of the city. More importantly, and we were happy to see this, the comprehensive plan puts an emphasis on prioritizing local foods, going so far as to state that within this city, community gardens, beekeeping, chicken coops, farmers markets, and local cooperative markets are all important links in the food chain. We are the only cooperative grocery not only in Lincoln, but in the entire state of Nebraska. Our goal is not to flood the market with conventional alcohol products, but to carry local, organic, non-GMO beer and wines, specifically and most importantly, those from local producers. There are now a number of local beer and wine producers, and we would love to support them by offering their products at the co-op, which would be a win-win for local businesses across the board. Last year, we provided over 30% of our sales from local goods, and we're working hard to support our local farmers. As the comprehensive plan notes, the city is committed to encouraging increased points of sale of local foods, and we're excited to see this as a priority for the city. And we don't want that to be our location and our business to be jeopardized because of where we're located. So thank you for considering this amendment as well as the addition. We appreciate your time, and hopefully if this doesn't pass today, an option for a waiver in the future would be something that could be considered.
Trent?
Do you know the zoning of your?
We're B3.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
John?
We will vote on this in 2 weeks on the 23rd. Could you submit the proposed amendment language that you had in mind?
Sure, of course.
And specifically,
And I know it is in there from the Planning Commission, but I'll submit it additionally.
Thank you.
Carl?
Thanks for being here.
Sure.
And for your strong support that you have brought forward. Is there a different way for you to sell alcohol by reconfiguring your store at all?
When we spoke to the Planning Commission quite a while back, it was brought to our attention that, in theory, we could, like you see in some Super Savers and things where there is kind of a separate area that sells alcohol, it has a separate entrance. Most of those have a separate entrance in, but then you can get to and from the store through those. For our footprint, in the location we're in, that would take a considerable amount of space away from what we have now. And if you've been to Open Harvest, it's not a large store. So taking that away, if we had a separate space, which would then, you're right, make it possible, because that separate space would then be judged whether or not it was 100 feet. Right now, our footprint is about 34 feet from the property line to the back of the building, but that could be possible. However, we were told, and we didn't look into it further because this would be a non-starter, it would have to have its own point of sale system, its own staff. So it wouldn't become that one-stop shopping experience, its own entrance, and to go in, have to check out, then to go out, then to have to go in. It just doesn't fulfill the goals. Also, it's reasonably cost prohibitive. And there could be other building codes that wouldn't allow it anyway, given the location and small space we have. We don't know that yet, because again, it's not a viable option for us at this time.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Are there others who'd like to speak to this item?
Pat Anderson Cifuentes. I'm with NeighborWorks, and I live in Everett, 1500 South 11th Street, and which is one of the areas, I know that you have all the information from the planning department about how that would affect, how this change would affect older neighborhoods. And I believe South Street, especially between 9th and 17th, would be one of those areas. There are already in that 7 blocks, 8 blocks, there's already 5 off sale. And that does not count the bar and a restaurant. So some areas are already inundated with off sales, and the examples earlier that Mr. Hunsinger gave were restaurants. I don't think anybody has a problem with restaurants. That's not the same as off sale, it's very different. So I would ask you that you really consider that you not make this decision for one business, because it has much longer term effects. And this is the only tool that old neighborhoods have. We don't have covenants, we don't have, when old 100-year-old neighborhoods were established, there wasn't the zoning. We have no protection. So this is the one small tool we have, and I would ask that you not do away with it until there is something that replaces it. And I think, the other point I wanted to make was the correlation when I gave testimony, because I know you have that in your packet also, to the planning commission, that the correlation between calls for service and off sale and alcohol sales is tremendous. That's not made up, that's real. If you live in that area, you feel it. And this ordinance does affect the results of that. You increase alcohol sales, the disorder increases. So I would just ask you to think not about one business, but long-term.
Jane.
Pat, at the Planning Commission, some of the discussion was that perhaps we do need to revisit this ordinance, and some of the dialogue centered around looking for ways to recraft it based on the use. So a grocery store, certainly like Open Harvest, would be a good example. Is this something that NeighborWorks has discussed or have thoughts on, or would like to bring it forward to the planning department to look at what use in the neighborhood is appropriate besides a restaurant or a bar to offer off sale? And it doesn't necessarily have to be a grocery store, but since Open Harvest is here, that's sort of a really good example that everybody seems to support, the neighbors support, Open Harvest having the ability to sell alcohol, but because of its location and restrictions, current restrictions, it's prohibited to do so.
I think if one space opened up, it would probably allow them, and my number is 240, so I have been a member, probably since some people were born before. No, we haven't discussed it in-house, I think, but we have to be very careful, and it does take a broader community discussion, I think. We have to be careful with the waiver system. I remember those days, and and the city council had request after request after request, and you want to be fair in the waivering system, but when you're bombarded, it's difficult to maintain that.
I guess with the Neighborhood Association Alliance and their recommendation and their opposition to expanding or changing the current, is that something, do they have a meeting coming up? Is that something that they could dialogue
we do
about?
happen to have a forum coming up January 28th, which you've probably already heard about. I think, or if you don't have an invite, you'll be getting one soon. And that is something we can discuss at that time.
Okay, so thank you.
Would anyone else like to speak to this item?
I didn't hear you real clearly. Are you asking for opposition?
I was initially we like to have people who are in favor, and I don't know if anyone
I'm in
else.
opposition.
Okay. Are there any other folks here who are wanting to speak in favor of this change to the code? Okay. No, seeing none. You, sir, go ahead. You can go ahead.
No? Okay. Sorry. There should be one for you. Russell Miller, 341 South 52nd Street in Lincoln. I'm in opposition to this ordinance. The current ordinance has been in effect since the mid-1990s, and it has served the residential neighborhoods well, and I emphasize the word residential. Considerable time has been spent talking about B2 zoning and its alcohol requirements. This proposed ordinance does not involve B2. It involves all the others. B2 zoning requires 5 acres as a minimum area. There is no minimum lot size in the zoning districts that this proposal is addressing. In fact, many of these lots are in the 1/2 to 3/4 acre size. The small lots is the problem, and that is why this proposed change should be stopped. Everyone has to be careful with remembering situations that are 20 years old. But as I remember, in the 1990s, it seemed like there was a gas station on every corner, and these gas stations all decided to be convenience stores that would sell alcohol. This meant, in some instances, off-sale beer was being sold and consumed in the convenience store parking lots. Because of the relatively small size of the lot and the gas station, this outdoor consumption was very close to residential housing. It was very disruptive to the residents. After a very hard and contentious fight, and it was contentious, and it was not exactly nasty, but it wasn't pleasant either. After a very hard and contentious fight, the neighborhoods were able to get the 100-foot setback that provided some relief for the adjacent homes and families. I particularly recall the bad situation of this happening in the gas station at the southeast corner of South 48th and Randolph. All businesses can always enlarge their lots to meet their 100-foot requirement by buying the adjacent lots. An example of this happening is at that gas station that I referred to at southeast corner of 48th and Randolph. They bought the adjacent lot on the south side in 2001 and built their present building in 2002. I'm pointing out that this business, or Walgreens, should have been well aware that the alcohol restrictions that were passed in 1994. In other words, Walgreens knew, and they accepted the alcohol restriction when they built the building. Since this is an ordinance change, I suggest and urge that a new item be added
added that mandates all off-sale alcohol should be warm. This change would be a major step in discouraging drinking while driving. Some years ago, I drove a semi, and as you know, semi-sets are high off the ground. Many people don't realize that the driver of the semi can look down into the adjacent car. And it was surprising to me that it wasn't every car, but it was surprising how frequently I would see somebody, and I'd be driving here between my route was 3:30 to about 5:30. And how many open containers were in that car, people drinking. And to me, where were they getting this stuff? Well, they had to be getting it at some convenience store, because it was cold. So eliminate that, and we could eliminate some DWIs. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there others who'd like to testify? Please come forward.
Hello, I'm Bob Reeves. I live at 3236 Dudley Street, and I'm secretary of the Clinton Neighborhood Organization. And I just want to point out that the Clinton Neighborhood Board in November voted that we were in opposition to this proposal. We have felt that the not having a waiver and having the 100-foot requirement has been beneficial to neighborhoods, and we would not like to see that changed. We think it can have a lot of negative effects on a neighborhood to have the liquor sales that close. I mean, I know there are places that are grandfathered in, but we don't want to see more. So that's our position on that. Thank you very much.
Other questions? Could I just ask you, can you explain some of the negative effects? We've heard some from Mr. Russell, but what do you see as the main problems with having the proximity?
Usually it can can cause a lot more of the potential of noise and rowdiness and disturbances to the nearby residents. A lot of times a store will decide to be open later hours because they're selling, there'll be liquor. Now that might not, in the case of Walgreens, I don't know what their hours are, but it could mean a lot more late night activity right next to neighbors' homes and so forth. So that's another negative thing. Is also the problem of litter. There's a lot of problems that we see coming from having alcohol sales very close to residences.
Thank you.
But I think we also were convinced that the previous system in which you had waivers was not working well at all, and so we do not want you to go back to a system of where each applicant can come in to ask for a waiver and think that that is a possibility. It should be a consistent policy.
Thank you. Are there others who'd like to speak to this item?
Richard Halverson, 6311 Inverness Road, and you have a difficult decision here today. These two locations actually should probably get a waiver if you had a waiver, but you don't have a waiver. And I'm thinking your actions could have unforeseen consequences. Because you think of all the abandoned gas stations you see about, around Lincoln. Now, if this passes, theoretically, lots of those could be open as liquor stores. And again, like I say, most of them are close to neighborhoods. So I know maybe you can craft, I don't know if it's possible to craft something like percentage of liquor sales toward grocery items or not, Because I admit these two businesses probably would, if they had a waiver system, maybe should be allowed to do it, because again, they're not totally alcohol, but again, you don't know what's going to happen if this is passed. So, all right, thanks.
So are you in favor or against?
Huh?
Are you in favor or against?
I'm against, yes. Sorry.
Thank you. Any further testimony? Please come forward now if you want to speak on this item before we move on. Okay. Please call the next item, Teresa.
He wants to rebut.
Oh, I'm sorry. My apologies, Mark. And we haven't done staff questions. Do we have any staff questions first? Mark, I'm going to ask some staff questions, and then give you a chance to rebut. Is someone from planning? Yeah, David? We have a lot of different zoning codes, and most people aren't familiar with the nuances of them. Can you please respond to some of the ideas that have been presented to us about all zoning codes being treated in a similar fashion, and why, in fact, you're recommending that not be the case? Can you help us understand the rationale?
Sure. I think one point to be made related to that question is that we do have different standards for different zoning districts, so I don't think that there's a presumption that every district should be treated similarly or the same. So I think we should consider it in that manner, first of all. In relation to these standards, there's a benefit to having, and this is in relation to the comment about going back to, or the lack of consistency with the waiver system that was in place prior to the standards that we have. That what we have today, it does provide some consistency and expectations of what you can and can't do on a property based on the existing code. So I think there is value in that as well. So both the expectation can be known by having the standards in those different zoning districts, and I don't believe that we should be expecting the zoning districts to all have the same standards. In this case, what has been pointed out is that in the B2 and B5, these are, generally speaking, not in all cases, but generally speaking, larger developments that have larger spacing built into the developments. The B1 and B3 in particular, those are often on smaller lots, smaller areas, often in older areas of the city, closer to neighborhoods. So that's a point that would be made as to why we would not have the same standard for all the different zoning districts. I would also just point out that I think it is pertinent to this discussion that the proposal that we do have before us today, the breadth and extent of it does open up the possibility of alcohol sales on over our count, and when we looked at this in the planning department, was 650 or more properties. I think that is a significant consideration to be brought into this discussion. We have these standards in place partly for limiting the proliferation of alcohol sales. So that is part of the staff finding of this as well.
Jane.
David, how many of those locations of the 650 that it would impact, and I don't know if you've looked at it, would involve a grocery store like Open Harvest?
I do not have, we did not look at that for particular uses, but I think that point is one of those that if there is interest in continued discussion on what impacts there are and what type of uses or differentiation based on uses, I think that's something that could be looked at further, but that was not part of this review.
Okay, thank you.
Roy.
Are you aware of what state laws are regarding using zoning to regulate liquor sales?
I am.
Tell us a little bit about it.
The State Liquor Commission is in charge of disseminating and approving liquor sale licenses, but the local zoning is in place, is available to a local jurisdiction to provide for basically site development and review at the local level. But then the actual approval of the licenses for liquor sales does go to the State Liquor Commission.
Okay, so if somebody, in this case Walgreens, applied for a liquor license and the city did not approve that because of zoning, the state could approve it, correct?
I'm going to quickly refer to our legal staff for that interpretation, but my understanding is that local zoning is taken into account and regulations at the local level are taken into account at the state level when taking into consideration what the local community is in favor of or not in favor of.
Okay.
Other questions for planning? Okay. There was a fair amount of, the planning commissioners definitely had a lot of sympathy for the applicant and Open Harvest. Can you help us understand if they had suggestions or any sort of thoughts on, I mean, they voted against it in the end, but did they have any suggestions for your department or for city policy that, found middle ground in any way, shape, or form?
The discussion began to go down the road of, should we be looking at this more closely? Are there conditions currently that should be looked at in the present day that may have changed based from when these current regulations are put in place? At that point, it was suggested that they take action on the proposal that's at hand, but that we could be looking at something in more detail in the future if that was desired.
Okay. And then also, Ms. Payne offered a proposed amendment, and could you speak to the content of that for us? It came before planning too, so.
Yeah, I think that there was a last-minute suggestion of possibly looking at the use of a public street right-of-way as being the available distance separation for liquor sales. Again, that wasn't part of the submittal that was put forward, and that's not what we studied in detail. I think that is an example of what we would need a lot more study of, because I think we would want to make sure that we know what we would be talking of unintended consequences of previous actions. I think we want to be very careful with how we would potentially change these regulations before actually approving any changes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much. Okay. Mark, did you want to have rebuttal?
Yeah, briefly, it's a little dazzling to hear all the praise heaped on Open Harvest as an exception to this process, but not paying any attention to any of the other businesses that might want to participate as well. I'm all in favor of Open Harvest. I think they ought to be able to have a liquor license. I think they ought to be able to sell locally brewed beers the same way Jane sells all the national beers. I mean, it's a silly kind of restriction that really is so arbitrary and so poorly defined that it is, without a waiver process, it needs to be consistent. I mean, if there is merit to the proposition that separation from licensed premises or from the central activity of selling alcohol is somehow protective of those adjacent residential uses, then it ought to be consistent. It's not to say that you should have every rule of the B4, B5 and B2 and B3 and B1 exactly the same, but as to this particular use, it seems to me that some consistency makes some sense, particularly when you've deprived yourselves of the opportunity to make any sort of independent judgment on individual cases. You removed from the ordinance the ability to make exceptions. And everybody here who's opposed to this change says, we don't want a waiver system because waivers are too arbitrary, waivers are too hard to keep track of, there are too many of them. And you know, perhaps that is what, I mean, I think what caused the removal of that provision is that literally the council got tired of having all the hearings. And this way, you don't have to have any hearings. Well, I'm trying to keep it that way, and I'm trying to be consistent. And the fact that you have a larger district in a B5 or B2 situation doesn't mean that you have any more protection. I've demonstrated that with the photographs. There's nothing that keeps Asara from turning into a sports bar tomorrow, or or to a big off-sale distribution outlet. None of that is prohibited in that location, and it's 50 feet away from the rear yard of the townhouses behind it. The district size really doesn't have anything to do with the individual setbacks of buildings and lots. And finally, I have to say, I drafted this ordinance in the first place. I worked with the city council's internal liquor committee to get it approved, primarily in order to get the city council a little more say in whether or not liquor licenses would be approved, because at that time, the State Liquor Commission was issuing licenses to anybody who wasn't a felon and who had a piece of property that was zoned. And they wanted to have a little bit more influence on that process, and this is the method we chose. And I don't recall any help from neighborhood groups in getting that done, to tell you the truth. But be that as it may, it has become kind of a flag for the neighborhood groups, and frankly, I don't think that what I'm proposing here has any adverse impact any more than the zero setback requirements that exist in the B2 and B5. I try to answer any other questions you might have.
Well, I guess I would just want to follow up on the point of consistency. I mean, 100 feet is a consistent number.
But it's not required in the B2 and B5.
But, okay, so 50 feet, you're saying, is the consistent number, but what about the, I don't know, other places that don't meet that? Or you say you'd be okay with 0 or 50, or which?
The reason that I inserted 50 feet as the minimum is that is the presumed minimum when there is parking associated with an alcohol distribution license in the B2 and B5. If you have parking spaces within the side or rear yard in a B2 and B5, you have to measure that 100 feet to the entrance from outside of 50 feet from the abutting property. In other words, if you have a parking space back there, you have to make sure you're at least 50 feet away in order to start measuring that 100 feet. It's a small thing, but without it, without the 50-foot presumption, there is no minimum setback whatsoever. If there's no parking back there, if the use permit allows the building to be 5 feet away from the property line, the licensed premises can be 5 feet away from the property line.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Teresa, can you please call the next item?
Yes, I'll call items 33 and 34 together. They are Comp Plan Amendment 16001, amending the 2040 Lincoln Lancaster County Comp Plan to amend Chapter 5 to remove the reference to Lincoln's theater policy, and Text Amendment 16006, amending Sections 27.63.630 and 27.06.150 of the Lincoln Municipal Code relating to indoor theaters as a permitted special use by amending Section 27.63.630 to allow indoor theaters in the B2 or B3 district, and to terminate the requirement that indoor theaters in the B5 district be allowed only as a permitted special use by amending Section 27.06.150 to amend the Commercial Recreation and Entertainment Facilities Use Group Table to allow indoor theaters in the B2 and B3 district as a permitted special use, and to allow indoor theaters in the B5 district effective January 1st, 2022 as a permitted use, and repealing Sections 27.63.630 and 27.06.150 as hitherto existing.
That was a lot.
Yes.
Tim C., City Law Department. I stand before you today, bring forward to you a proposal brought forward to us by Councilman Christensen with respect to the city's theater policy. I'm glad that you're warmed up on policy discussions, because that is all you have in front of you here today. There is no theater standing behind me with a proposal to build a theater. This is quite literally a policy discussion. You have before you a comprehensive plan amendment, which would remove 2 references in the comprehensive plan to the city's theater policy. I think that's laid out fairly clearly in the resolution. I would note for you that because the Planning Commission voted to deny or recommend denial of that change, it would take 5 votes of the City Council in order to approve that change. So that's just something for you to be aware of as we move forward. The other matter before you is a text amendment, which, as Teresa laid out, gets into 27.63.630, which is a section with respect to special permitted uses specific to indoor theaters. There is language in there that would allow smaller theater concepts, whatever they may be, in neighborhood commercial districts in the B2 and the B3 areas. There are a couple of conditions there. The one being that no theater shall have not more than 250 seats throughout the theater. Another providing for some provisions with respect to ingress and egress from the property. The second change in 2763630 is probably the more an equally significant one, and that would be to remove the special permit requirements for theaters in the B5 districts. The B5 districts are the only district now where you could have a movie theater in the city of Lincoln other than the B4, the downtown area. Those B5 districts are allowed one theater with no more than 6 screens. By removing those requirements, you would be able to have the theaters as a matter of right. You would not have limitations on just how many screens you could have within a district. You would also not have a requirement as to how many theaters you could have in a district. So you could have more than one movie theater in one of the B5 districts. As I understand it, currently you have movie theaters in all but 2 of the existing B5 districts, those being 27th and Superior and 84th and Highway 2. So you would essentially open up the other B5 districts to different theater concepts, whatever those might be, and whoever might choose to bring them forward. The other change you'll see is in 2706150. This is simply the use group designations for commercial, recreational, and entertainment facilities, just to reflect the changes that we would make in 2763.630. I don't want to be too lengthy with you today. I think these come to us primarily from Councilman Christensen as a way of opening up the market and allowing the free market to work. With that, I'd try to answer any of the technical questions you might have about these.
Okay, any questions? Carl?
Yeah, okay, so there's a possibility to put, I think what Roy's called an arts theater, one screen theater in other zone districts, correct?
Right, in the B2 and the B3 districts.
Okay. And that would be limited to one screen only, is that what I recall?
I don't know that we specified the number of screens. I think it says there shall be no more than 250 seats throughout the theater. Okay. So if you wanted to have 2 screens of 100 seats, I think you could do that.
All right.
Any other questions for Tim? Jane?
But in the resolution 16.147, you said that in the B5 districts, it would be permitted multi-screens, correct?
Absolutely.
But only effective January 1st of the year 2022.
That's a good catch on your part.
Okay. And what is your understanding of the reason of that year 2022? What's so special about 2022?
I'll do my best to summarize that. I think it's really just to recognize that business operates best when there's a sense of predictability out there. And if you know what's coming in 5 years, you can adapt your business model to it. Whereas if you have something changed on you overnight, it's not exactly the fairest practice to go about. So I think that was the thought process behind that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions? No? Thank you.
Thank you.
Would anyone like to speak to this item?
Is there anybody else?
No, don't know.
Hi, Tim O'Neill. I'm with O'Neill Heinrich Law Firm, 800 Lincoln Square, 121 South 13th Street, and I represent the Marcus Corporation. And this is a policy question. I think the theater policy has been around in some form for almost 30 years. It's been a very successful policy, and it continues to be a successful policy not only in downtown, but in the neighborhoods where the theaters exist. So this isn't a downtown theater policy, this is a Lincoln theater policy. And so the impact will be felt not only downtown, but in the neighborhoods all throughout the city. Downtown theater brings around 600,000 people downtown a year, which complements the restaurants and other local small businesses. They bring hundreds of thousands of people to the neighborhoods to support the new businesses that have been created around there. And we've seen quite a few resurgence of business in East Park and Edgewood. and in South Point. I mean, we've seen a lot of growth in those areas, and in no small part to Marcus's efforts to regenerate those areas too. The restaurant industry is what I've been involved with for over 30 years, and it's primarily what I do. And I know how fragile it is, and it is very fragile. The casual dining is very competitive, and if you take that many people out of the mix downtown, there's going to be a significant impact. We've seen Applebee's close, we've seen Doozies, we've seen Good Sense, we've seen other restaurants close that are, it's a difficult road to hoe. Anybody can make it on Friday and Saturday night. It's what happens on Sunday through Thursday. And the theaters bring people down 365 days a year. And that's a big deal. That's a consistent, it's not 8 football games, it's not 20 basketball games, it's not 15 concerts. It's every day of the year. Marcus has been responsible and consistent in implementing the policy. They've invested millions of dollars reinventing the theaters in terms of sound, seating, capacity, amenities. Their pricing is competitive. I think the report from the consultant confirmed that. It's not for just Marcus to say, the third-party consultant confirmed it. And they didn't even consider what they had in the value packs for students and Tuesday family nights. So I think there's a real impetus that Marcus has been competitive and a classy operator in town. I don't think anybody can dispute that. What will happen if the theater policy goes away? Well, there'll be changes in the market. We will have a change in Lincoln. We will have the neighborhood theaters, at least one, if not 2, close eventually. There's no question about it. We will turn into 2 multiplexes, and so we'll have, in 2 parts of the town, benefiting one developer for sure, we're going to have these multiplexes, and we're going to see the neighborhood theaters, 1 or 2, go away. We're going to see downtown change. There's no question about it. Now, does it go away? Hard to say. There's a good student body down here. The residents' population is picking up, so will it go away? Probably not, but will it change? Absolutely. So why are we doing this? What's the point? Competition? Anybody can be in a theater. There's nothing that says Marcus is the only one that can build here. Somebody can build downtown. Somebody can build in the other B5s. They can. It's not just Marcus. The competitive angle is not just theaters. We have Netflix as a competitor. We see Macy closing hundreds of stores because of the online shopping. Same thing with the theater industry. Greg Marcus is here to discuss the philosophy of Marcus and what their investment plans are for the city based on what the policy is that you decide. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Jane.
Tim, in the text amendment 16006, that's resolution 16-147, going back to that B5 district effective January 1st, 2022, that would permit a multi-screen in the B5 districts. How do you view that?
Well, nobody makes a multi-million-dollar investment thinking it's going to go away in 5 years. I mean, is that what you're talking about, the sunset of 2022? Is that the part?
Is that which section is that? Tim, is that section 27.06.150? No?
No, I don't mean to steal Tim's time here, but 2706.150 is just the use group. It's just the designation of it's really a reflection of the changes that are made in 2763.630. The sunset provision is stated as the last sentence of 63630 as well. It's reflected in both places.
And I guess the question, let me rephrase the question. You have no problems with those text amendment changes?
Well, the only thing we would be willing to concede is acceptable to us is the small theater exception in B2 and B3. Other than that, we're opposed to all the changes proposed. There's none of them that are acceptable. And you got to think, what does this do for the average citizen in Lincoln? Is this going to make the price go down if we do this? No. I mean, the market study has confirmed that it's competitive. Is it going to make greater amenities? No. The study confirmed that Marcus is leading in amenities above and beyond in the region. So what's going to happen? You're going to have to drive farther? Yeah. And a developer's going to make a little more money. Other than that, a citizen in Lincoln isn't going to benefit from removal of this policy. We're going to see small businesses get hurt, and that's what's going to happen.
Other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Are there others who'd like to testify? Please come forward.
Good afternoon. I'm Greg Marcus. I'm the president and CEO of the Marcus Corporation. We've been a proud member of the Lincoln community since 2008 when we purchased these 4 theaters for $10 million. It's the Grand, the East Park, the Edgewood, and the South Point Cinemas. And, we were so impressed by Lincoln that, and its approach to development, that when we had the opportunity to purchase the Cornhusker in 2012, we did so enthusiastically. We purchased the property for $38 million. We put another $12 million into it. And we restored it to its proper place as the premier hotel in Lincoln. I might be a little biased, but I think it's the premier hotel in Lincoln. Not only have we invested in Lincoln, but in keeping with my family's and our company's philosophy of giving back, we've been active community participants. We've given thousands of dollars to local charities, and our associates have volunteered thousands of hours of their time as well. Clearly, we're committed to downtown as well as the greater Lincoln community, and I appreciate the opportunity today to participate in the ongoing discussion of the city's movie theater policy. I'm here today to speak in support of continuation of the long-standing and successful theater policy that is part of the 2040 Lincoln-Lancaster County Comprehensive Plan. I applaud this community for having the foresight and continued good sense to understand that as the plan states, and I quote, "Downtown Lincoln is the heart of our community. A strong, vital downtown provides a common center for all of Lincoln and Lancaster County and will be a catalyst for future growth." Not many downtowns of this size or larger have a strong movie theater. Even downtowns with nice residential, office space, restaurants, they've seen their theaters struggle or fail, or they don't even exist. And that's due to competition from the suburbs. That's where the bulk of the population lives. But Lincoln is unique. And it is clearly due to the thoughtful approach to the movie theater policy. Lincoln clearly understands the drawing power of a movie theater and the positive impact that it can have on the surrounding businesses. The Grand Theater, it draws nearly 600,000 people downtown every year. And as you all know, theater customers patronize many other downtown establishments as part of a night at the movies. And beyond that, they build the habit of regularly going downtown. There's that old saying, out of sight, out of mind. Well, if that's true, then in sight, in mind must be true. That applies. It's the habit of really wherever you are. A movie theater is clearly a demand generator, and that's good for Lincoln's downtown and all its communities. Not only does the Grand positively impact all of downtown, but it also serves to pull people more toward the center of downtown, which has not seen as much investment as the Haymarket area. As an owner of the Cornhusker, I can tell you what you already know, and that is not all the areas of downtown have flourished equally. And maintaining a draw like the theater remains extremely important to promoting current and future development throughout all of downtown. A change to the movie theater policy would undoubtedly have an adverse impact on Lincoln's downtown, as the Grand Theater's attendance would be siphoned off back to the suburbs. To drive admissions of over 500,000 people to the Grand, we have to be pulling from all over the market. Unsurprisingly, our loyalty club data shows that only 9% of our admissions come from the downtown zip code. As the study you commissioned indicates, the overall Lincoln market outperforms the country in annual moviegoing in attendance per person by 15%. What does Lincoln's national outperformance indicate? Well, it indicates a number of things. Most important, it shows the market is being well served and that any additional screens will be unlikely to increase moviegoing. The more likely result is that the movie-going pie is going to be divided into just smaller slices. And it is certain that downtown is going to have a smaller slice of that pie. That 15% outperformance is also indicative of the benefits of both our significant investments into our properties as well as our competitive pricing strategies like $5 Tuesdays, Student Thursdays, Young at Heart Fridays. And while I certainly understand the philosophical desire to foster a competitive environment, I would submit that competitive environment already exists. The current ordinance does not prohibit other theater operators from coming to the market, and in and of itself, is one of the factors that leads us to continually reinvest in our properties and keep our pricing competitive.
Sorry to interrupt, but can you wrap up your testimony?
Sure.
Thank you.
The investments we've made are significant. As I'm sure you can tell, we didn't just freshen these complexes up. We spent nearly $8 million. And they don't look anything like they used to. I think you all know that. From the Zephyros Express to the real sizzles, Take Fives, Ultra Screens. Lincoln has a sampling of theaters that beats the country. We base these investments on the community's published plans. I believe the philosophy of consistency that business owners can count on is one that must be considered as well. That predictability will lead to further investment. Specifically downtown, we're prepared to invest another $3 million to put in more recliners in this market. But we need the assurance that the community is going to remain vigilant in promoting the downtown theater. If I could just say one last thing.
Well, let me say, you can talk longer if I ask a question. Would you
Sure,
like
go
to say? Would you like to say some more things?
I would. If the theater policy in Lincoln were to change to look more like the rest of the world, I'm very afraid that eventually Lincoln will look more like the rest of the world. These are very unique, small, right, the rest of the world, they don't have very small, unique neighborhood theaters. They're going to disappear. They're going to take the traffic with them, and eventually we're going to have two large multiplexes in the suburbs and a weekend downtown cinema. That's what the rest of the world looks like. I do worry about the unintended consequences of well-meaning legislation. It's a phenomenon I'm sure you are all aware of. You really have pulled off something amazing. For a city like Lincoln, you have strong neighborhood suburban theaters and a vital downtown theater. This just does not exist in a lot of places. I don't know of any, actually. You've done something amazing, and I'd hate to see that go away. So I thank you today. We've invested over $70 million throughout Lincoln, and we look forward to growing in this vibrant city for years to come.
We have
Ask
some
me
other
whatever you want
questions.
now. I'm open for questions.
Trent, and
Thank
then
you,
John.
thank you, Mr. Marcus. Appreciate your investments into this community in many different ways. Just a few questions for you. Does any other community have a policy like Lincoln does?
I don't know of any, no. I don't know that no one does, I just don't know of any.
Okay, and so in all the markets that you're competing in, there's no other policy that's like Lincoln's?
No.
Okay. And from your testimony, it seems like neighborhood theaters are unique to Lincoln. Is that a competitive plan moving forward? For the Marcus Corporation, is the neighborhood theater a competitive plan moving forward?
Oh, clearly it is, because we just invested within the last few years $8 million in these theaters and in these local theaters. I mean, you know what East Park looked like. I mean, it was a very tough theater. It needed investment, and look what's happened around it. You know, the strip shopping center in front of it. I mean, the whole thing is getting healthier again. I mean, that's the benefit of what this does. But we made that investment, really. I mean, under your all guidance. This was your plan, and a great plan. But I wouldn't have thought it up. But we went with it, and that's why we made the investments we did. That's why we did what we did at South Point.
Are theaters really kind of regional destinations, though? I mean, because as my family, when we look at going to a movie, we basically look at the app and see what time's available, and then run to that theater. And it could be South Point, it could be East Park, it could be downtown. It just depends on what show and what time, and what the availability is.
I think people do look for convenience and show times. I mean, you're absolutely right about that. But they tend to go what's closer to them. We play most everything in the neighborhood theaters, so you're seeing everything everywhere. So they tend to go pretty conveniently, unless they, want to go downtown for something special, because downtown really has, you've said it. I mean, you're right. I preach about this at home in Milwaukee all the time, about the importance of a strong downtown. It is the beating heart. I mean, it does no good. If your house doesn't have a strong foundation, the house doesn't do very well. And so you understand that as a community, your plan says it, you've executed on it really brilliantly, and and you get people to come downtown, and you've made it happen.
Are you building any theaters across the country right now?
Yes.
Okay, are they more than 6 screens?
Yes.
Okay, are all of them more than 6 screens? Are you building any under 6 screens?
No, we're not.
Okay, all right, that answered my question. Thank you.
John? And then
Yes.
Carl?
First of all, I want to congratulate you on your piano skills that you had. That was a nice preface to the recent movie there in the holiday season.
Thank you.
Mean pianist. So, okay. I've got a couple of questions. One, if you could address the competition in your industry, and there was a little bit, I think Mr. O'Neill talked about Netflix. Talk about, and in fact, it ties in my second question of what's currently there in the means of communicating movies, and then secondly, where does the future pretend that to go?
I would call, we have two kinds of competition, really. One is from other theater operators, potentially other people coming into a market. And interestingly, it's easier now to come into a market with another competitive theater. Someone wanted to come into Lincoln with a 6-screen theater, they can come in with a 6-screen theater. It used to be, in the old days, when you had to advertise in the newspaper, that it helped to have a lot of theaters in a given market, because you had the biggest ad in the newspaper, and so people would see it, and that was a competitive advantage. Unfortunately, that's not how, or fortunately, I don't know, depending on your perspective, if you own a newspaper, it's unfortunate. That is not how it works anymore. Now they go online. And so having the biggest ad really isn't an advantage. You can have one complex in a market. That direct competition is one we face all the time, and frankly, understanding the rubric that you all have for how you wanted your theater market designed, we operate under that, and that is really why we invested in our theaters. And we said we must remain competitive, because somebody else could come here, and we need to be competitive with that. And so we put a lot of money into those theaters. But there's also other competition too, and that is, as Tim alluded to, we face the competition from any out-of-home entertainment, in-home entertainment. You have a flood of entertainment dollars, of entertainment opportunities coming into your house. Netflix, Hulu, cable. I mean, there's so much coming in. It is very competitive. And we have to be responsive to that. And that's another reason that we have to have our complexes be state-of-the-art. And it keeps our pricing competitive, because you can sit home and watch something for peanuts, basically. Or you can go out. You can go to another restaurant. You can go see a show. You can go to a Husker game. I can tell you this much. When the Huskers are playing, there's no one in the movie theaters. That is one thing I'm certain of. So it's very competitive on multiple levels.
Carl.
Thank you, and Mr. Marcus, thanks for being here and for your investment in Lincoln. I wanted to ask you about those numbers, make sure I got them right. So you bought the Cornhusker Hotel for $38 million, and you've put $12 million additionally into that.
Mm-hmm.
You bought the Douglas Theaters for $10 million, and you've put $8
so far, yes,
into it so far. And that's my next question. How much more do you anticipate investing into those theaters to bring them up to the standards of your corporation?
Well, we don't have too much more to do right this minute, because there's not much more you can do. I mean, you have, I challenge anyone to go look at any other set of theaters in any other markets. You're not going to find any as robust as these. As a company, it's been our philosophy: maintain our assets, take care of them. We've been in business 80 years. I look pretty good for having been in business 80 years, I guess, right? But we've been in business long. the lessons learned. We think generationally. We think long term. We invest long term. We make these investments with long-term outlooks. The next thing on our docket is really downtown, to put $3 million into Lincoln Grand, and put in and have recliners downtown too. So, but we need long-term predictability. That's what we need. but we've made some significant investments, and whatever comes next, we'll be here to make the next investment.
Jane.
Mr. Marcus, thank you so much for being here. I'm a big fan of yours when I go to the theater and I see you on the big screen, and I have to tell you and thank you for the major investment that you put in East Park. It has been a true transformation to a catalyst in that whole shopping center, and the parking lot is jammed with cars at all times. And I guess I wish I had a question, but I don't. But I just wanted to thank you for your substantial investment, certainly in our downtown and in our community. I think we're a better community for the generosity that your company has shown to our city.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you, Mr. Marcus.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to speak?
Good afternoon, Council. Terry Ulan, Downtown Lincoln Association. I've got a short statement to read from the DLA, but I wanted to say real quickly that we've really appreciated the consistent support that the Council's given to downtown and the Central Business District, and particularly with your patience through the Business District Improvement expansion in the West Haymarket and the renewal that we were just through this spring. So that was really a good process for us. I'll follow with the Downtown Lincoln Association wishes to express support for maintaining the current theater policy as outlined in the comprehensive plan. Since 1984, the comprehensive plan has identified an entertainment district in downtown, and subsequent updates of the plan and zoning ordinance reaffirm the desirability of focusing efforts to maintain such a district downtown. We would oppose the changes proposed with the exception of the suggested change to the B2 and B3 district zoning to allow for smaller niche operators. Some history. When the opportunity presented itself in 2004, DLA and its board of directors actively supported a concerted effort to establish and support the Grand Theater's presence in downtown. The current theater policy was absolutely critical to the development and success of the Grand. Since the establishment of the Grand by then owner Douglas Theaters, the Grand Theater has been an especially important asset to downtown Lincoln. As downtown entertainment focus, the Grand attracts almost 600,000 people to a year, and countless other businesses in the downtown core benefit from the consistent influx of patrons. The Grand generates activity and provides entertainment options for all age groups and families 7 days a week in comparison to periodic schedules for other venues. For all these reasons, DLA has historically seen the Grand as one of the most vital keys to the overall health of the downtown. It is true that many strides have been made toward a stronger downtown and have been taken since the policy was enacted, but changes to the current policy still create a potential for harm. The current theater policy supports downtown without a negative effect on the rest of the Lincoln community. The recent theater market analysis provided by the Economic Development Systems indicates its key findings and continued investment by Marcus in its theaters, as Greg has mentioned, and products even without the presence of direct competition, and offers its product at a price well within the range of comparable cities. According to the study, the existing city regulations related to cinema supply help preserve and reinforce the current market structure of a large downtown cinema supported by smaller neighborhood-serving facilities. The report makes no indication that the Lincoln community is disadvantaged by the current policy. To repeat our position, the Downtown Lincoln Association Board of Directors voted unanimously at the October 25th, 2016 meeting to support the theater policy as currently expressed. And I'll be happy to answer questions if I could.
Any questions for Terry? Okay. Thank you.
Could I add one more comment? Although I'd probably rather not have this issue come up, it is good to have this discussion because I think we've kind of forgotten. We haven't had this discussion for several years, and it does remind me and our DLA board of how important the theater policy has been and how much good we've gotten out of it. And even though it is practically a unique policy, I don't think we need to apologize for that. We've gotten a very profound positive effect from having an unusual policy in Lincoln. Thank you.
Thank you. Would others like to speak on this item?
Good afternoon, members of the council. I'm Debbie Brim, 10400 Yankee Hill Road, Lincoln, Nebraska. I also have an office downtown 1230 O Street, Suite 105. I'm here today to speak in favor of retaining the existing downtown theater policy. As many of you know, one of our family businesses was Douglas Theater Company, a company we sold to Marcus Theaters. When we constructed the Grand, the theater policy was in effect. In fact, we built all of our theaters under the policy as we were required to do so, and we agreed with it. I still do. Now, today, we do not have a dog in the fight regarding the theater policy, so I'm speaking as a longtime downtown business owner and downtown supporter. An argument I frequently hear is that a lot of money has been put into downtown, and since it is now a thriving area, it does not need any more special treatment. I disagree, because I feel the majority of the money and development has occurred in the West Haymarket. I do not feel that the Haymarket and the downtown are one entity. To me, they are two separate entities separated by 9th and 10th Streets. Granted, the Haymarket has numerous restaurants and bars, plus the arena to draw crowds and families to it. But this isn't true for what I consider to be downtown. I feel there are really only two drawing cards for all ages to downtown: the Grand and the Children's Museum. These two businesses are what brings families to downtown. And as you've heard, currently over 600,000 people annually attend the Grand. Obviously, the surrounding restaurants, fast food establishments, sandwich shops, and bars on P&Q streets benefit from these people coming to the Grand. If the theater policy goes away, another megaplex is built elsewhere, a large percentage of this 600,000 number will not come downtown to attend a movie. They'll go elsewhere. The movie theater will suffer, and the businesses on P&Q will suffer. Based on information from DLA, the Children's Museum attendance is approximately 200,000 per year. As great as that number is, you can see the importance of the Grand bringing 600,000 people to downtown. If you want to keep our downtown strong and safe for students and families, I hope you'll agree with me that the theater policy has been a key element in the success of downtown. Please do not repeal the downtown theater policy and risk jeopardizing one of the two attractions to the area. Please keep our downtown strong. Thank you very much. Are there any questions?
Any questions? Thank you. Okay, thank you. Are there others who'd like to speak?
Hi.
Welcome.
Matt Stricker. Have a retail store at 1219 P Street, and just recently bought the property at 1222 P Street. I'm here this afternoon just to say that the Grand Theater has been a great neighbor for us over the years. We've purchased stores 15 years ago, and we've enjoyed having them as neighbors. Their managers have always worked with us, and we've enjoyed that. I believe that the downtown needs a strong entertainment district, and it needs to have that draw to remain strong. And I think that the foundation that the city's laid out has created a very strong foundation for other businesses to come in and build off of, and we're just getting started on that with the retail and the other businesses that need to be built up down there.
Okay. Thanks. Thank you.
Madam Chairperson, members of the City Council, my name is Ed Swotek. I live at 5340 West McKelvey Road here in Lincoln. I've worked in marketing and business development here in Lincoln for the last 30 years. And I've also served on several community and civic boards, including the Downtown Lincoln Association, for the last 16 years. And was part of DLA's redevelopment discussion that brought the Grand Theater to downtown and supported the theater policy in 2005, and I continue to support it today. The City of Lincoln enjoys a quality of life like so few others. So much so, Lincoln is ranked as one of the most livable cities in the United States. In addition to its good people, Lincoln benefits from many quality amenities. We have great schools and universities, a strong and growing business community with good jobs, a variety of quality, affordable housing and strong neighborhoods, outstanding parks, good transportation and streets, strong and ample retail, and a diverse variety of entertainment choices, just to name a few. These amenities don't just happen, but are the direct result of insightful, visionary planning, a commitment to good zoning and public policy development, and a healthy working partnership with community stakeholders. The Lincoln Theater policy is one of these public policies that has brought immeasurable benefits to our community. In accordance with the Lincoln Comprehensive Plan, this policy has strengthened our vibrant downtown and solidified its position as the central location for commerce, government, entertainment, and the arts. It has contributed to building a quality network of healthy, state-of-the-art neighborhood theaters throughout Lincoln that have been able to successfully compete with changing industry and market dynamics. With each theater complex, this policy has helped to nurture the growth and success of countless nearby restaurants, retail establishments, and other related economic drivers. And it has also helped to anchor the emerging Peace Street retail corridor in downtown Lincoln, a major catalyst for our central business district and one of our community's Vision 2015 pillars. In fact, rather than serving as an industry-specific zoning guideline, the Lincoln Theater policy has become a visionary economic development tool for the benefit of the entire Lincoln community, including downtown, and it promotes economic activity and vitality. As was stated a little bit earlier, you know, instead of sitting at home and watching a movie on a big screen television in your family room, this policy has promoted the creation of a unique entertainment experience that typically includes dinner, a movie, shopping, and socializing. As a result of this experience, theater patrons spend additional dollars at adjacent businesses, which helps to create jobs, fill tenant spaces, provide activity, energy, and vibrancy to neighborhoods in downtown, and fuel sizable tax revenue for the city. Studies have shown as many as 50 to 80% of patrons visiting a downtown movie theater will visit other nearby establishments and spend on average $17 to $21 per person. With approximately 600,000 people visiting the Grand Theater downtown every year, this amounts to a very sizable economic market. Periodic discussions on existing public policies like this is exactly what healthy cities do. And it provides answers to relevant questions like, is the policy consistent with the long-range comprehensive plan for the city? Does it contribute to the economic well-being of the city as a whole, as well as its neighborhoods? Does it create an economic multiplier effect for neighboring support businesses? And is it making the quality of life better for the citizens of our community? In regards to the existing Lincoln Theater policy, the answer to each of these questions is a strong yes. As elected leaders of our community, I'd like to personally thank you for all the outstanding work each of you do every day to make Lincoln better for our citizens, businesses, and families. I also am very grateful that we are having an open, honest dialogue about the continued relevance and importance the Lincoln Theater policy has in serving Lincoln. The Lincoln Theater policy is working, and it's working well. And I urge you to keep this successful and proven economic development tool intact for the continued betterment and vitality of our neighborhoods, downtown, and our community. Thank you.
Questions, Carl?
Yeah, I just have to try to quantify things.
Sure.
So a statistic that you used, Ed, $17 to $21 per visit, is that?
Per person.
Per person.
Right.
Okay. Is that specific to the Grand or any theater, or?
No, these were actually studies that were conducted outside of Lincoln by the consultant in their study. But they have found that in other communities that have downtown theaters, 50 to 80% of them visit other businesses and spend on average $17 to $21.
Okay. So if I rounded the number, I can figure it out more easily. So if we use 20. Okay. I can do that.
I'll use $17.50, Carl.
Okay.
So.
All right. So that's $12 million a year.
That's a sizable amount of
That
money.
theater, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Trent?
Is that 17 additional dollars and including, it doesn't include the ticket price or any
That's
concessions?
at other nearby establishments.
And what's the source of that?
That's from that study that was commissioned by the city or the planning department, and you'll find it in that study.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Okay, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Would anyone else like to speak to this item? Seeing none, would you like to have?
Well, I'd like to have
staff?
just a word to sum things up. Well, what I can say is, Mr. Marcus, thanks for being here. And I have met with Tim O'Neill, appreciate his time. about this time last year, I think we met, and I found out that I could get an app for Marcus Theaters. And I'm sure that if Mr. Marcus had decided to check, he would have been able to tell that I went to Rogue One 3 times in one of his theaters, and that I have 86 loyalty points. Okay? So, what I'm trying to say here is I kind of almost wish as many people had an interest in protecting my business as yours. Because if they did, I'd be swimming in it. But the fact is, 2 things. One, there's the principle of competition and the sharpness it brings to every endeavor. When we compete, we improve. The next thing is Lincoln has grown and continues to grow. And we're approaching 300,000 people in our city. And I think it just might be time to allow for more than one entertainment hub in our city. I think much of what I heard tonight, while well-intentioned and well-meaning, is really fear of change, and fear of change holds us back.
Were there any further staff questions before we move on? Okay, did you want word? Okay. All right. Teresa, please call the next item.
All right, next is item 35, amending section 27.72.080 of the Lincoln Municipal Code as amended by text amendment 16007, ordinance number 20372, to delete the erroneous addition of the R1 district to the list of districts in which a decrease of the required front yard for new buildings is not allowed, even though 40% or more of the frontage along a block is developed with front yards less than required by the zoning ordinance.
Rick Pipson, Law Department. This is just a technical amendment to correct a drafting error that we erroneously inserted the R1 district in a section that we didn't intend to be there. And as drafted, it didn't conform with the staff report or the Planning Commission's recommendations of approval, so we're asking you to adopt the ordinance as amended. Thank
Any
you.
questions? All right, thank you. Would anyone like to speak to this item? All right, seeing none. Teresa, there has been a request from a member of the council to have a quick 5-minute break before we move into the voting session.
Okay.
So if we could go ahead and set the timer and allow for that 5-minute break, we will resume in just a bit.
Awesome.
Thank you.
about dinner, it's about the dogs.
And we're back. We are resuming this meeting of the Lincoln City Council on January 9th, 2017. We are moving now into our voting session. Teresa, will you take us there?
Yes. Public hearing resolutions, item 26 was placed on pending. Item 27 is alley repaving District 50 being ordered constructed, introduced by Raybold.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded by Roy. Sorry.
Okay, here.
Discussion? Please call the roll.
Camp,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Eskridge,
Yes.
Fellers,
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Lamb, Raybold.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 28 is Comp Plan Conformance 16011 to add the 1222 P Street Mixed-Use Redevelopment Project. Introduced by Raybold.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded by Carl. Discussion? All right. Well, this is just, it's nice to see continued investment in downtown. We heard from the applicant's attorney that seeing that what has happened on P Street has led to, additional investments by others to fix up old buildings and find new and creative uses for them. And this is adding to our housing stock, not just the retail on P Street. So it looks like it's going to be a project that very much conforms with the comp plan's vision for our downtown. Please call the roll.
Camp,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Eskridge,
Yes.
Fellers,
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Lamb, Raybold.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 29 is the professional services agreement with Iteris to provide NEPA evaluation and documentation for the North 27th Street Adaptive Signal Control Technology Project, introduced by Raybold.
So moved.
Second.
By Carl. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Camp,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Eskridge,
Yes.
Fellers,
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Lamb, Raybold.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Public hearing ordinances, second reading are items 30 through 35. Ordinances on third reading, items 36 through 41 are all the lease agreements and contracts with Verizon Wireless, all introduced by Fellers.
Do you need to read them all in, or should I just say so moved?
Do it.
I think just so moved.
So moved.
Second.
Second by Roy. Discussion? Well, I'll just add that these agreements amount to a new public-private partnership for our city between Verizon and the city of Lincoln, and this should improve access to wireless service in our downtown area and won't come at a cost to the city. I support this very much. Please call the roll.
Camp,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Eskridge,
Yes.
Fellers,
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Lamb, Raybold.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 42 is change of zone 16036, Lincoln Federal Bank Corp. for the Wilderness Hills Commercial Planned Unit Development at 27th and Yankee Hill, introduced by Fellers.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded by Roy. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Camp,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Eskridge,
Yes.
Fellers,
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Lamb, Raybold.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 43 is change of zone 05054E as in Edward, Prairie Village North Planned Unit Development at North 89th and Fremont, introduced by Fellers.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded by Roy. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Camp,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Eskridge,
Yes.
Fellers,
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Lamb, Raybold.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 44, text amendment 16014, amending section 2761090 of the Lincoln Municipal Code relating to the continuation of non-standard uses to automatically adjust the setback for existing buildings and uses when the city obtains property for right-of-way, introduced by Fellers.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded by Roy. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Camp,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Eskridge,
Yes.
Fellers,
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Lamb, Raybold.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 45, approving the transfer of funds from approved appropriations into the Golf Course Irrigation System CIP project for replacement of the irrigation pump station and wet well at Pioneers Golf Course, introduced by Fellers.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded by Carl. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 46, Comp Plan Amendment 16004, amending the comp plan to change the future land use map from public and semi-public and residential urban density to commercial on property located at the northeast corner of South 14th and Pine Lake Road, introduced by Fellers.
So moved.
Second by Cindy. Discussion. Oh, we have two members who've stepped out for the voting session on these items. Thank you. No other comments from, okay, well, I'll speak. This site should be developed and it should grow our city, but it's not inevitable that this site would be zoned commercial, which this comp plan amendment would ask be done. This land is better suited for residential zoning, for apartments, which is just what the comp plan shows today on the eastern boundary of this property. The comp plan says that's the most appropriate next-door neighbor to Hazel Scott Elementary School. Apartments would mean fewer traffic problems and fewer safety concerns. People who live year-round in a place are more familiar with their surroundings, and the people who'd be living in apartments at the site would know to watch for school children who are walking or biking along the trail on Pine Lake Road. Unlike people who would be coming in occasionally, maybe from as far as Beatrice, twice a month to go to a Costco. We all want Costco in Lincoln. Everyone who's written to us, who's called us, who's testified, has said they want Costco in Lincoln. I just don't think Costco belongs next to two schools, and therefore I don't intend to support this comp plan amendment or the change of zone. Please call the roll.
Camp?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
No.
Lamb?
Yes.
Motion carried 4-1. Item 47, change of zone 16030, Lincoln Memorial Park Cemetery Association for a change from AG Agricultural to B2 Planned Neighborhood Business, from AG Agricultural to R1 Residential, and from R1 Residential to B2 Planned Neighborhood Business at the northeast corner of 14th Street and Pine Lake Road, introduced by Fellers.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded by Carl. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Camp?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
No.
Lamb?
Yes.
Motion carried 4-1. Item 48, use permit 16009, application of Lincoln Memorial Park Cemetery Association for a use permit to allow up to 177,000 square feet of new commercial floor area, including a retail warehouse and motorized vehicle fuel facility at the northeast corner of South 14th and Pine Lake Road, introduced by Fellers.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded by Carl. Discussion? Carl.
Thanks.
We have some motions to amend.
Yes, we
Okay.
have a motion to
Okay,
amend
let's
number
do
2.
And 3. Did you get a copy of mine?
No, I did not.
Do we have someone who's making a motion to amend number 2?
This might be the same one. Yes, it is the same one. So we just have a motion to amend number 2.
Do you want to show them to Cindy and just make sure? Let's make sure that she has to look at it first to make sure.
I don't have a number 2, I have a number 3.
No, that's not the same.
It's not the same?
No, that's not the
Okay.
same.
I think the subparagraph under 2 is different.
Number 2.
Okay.
Okay, so who's introducing motion to amend number 2? Is that from the applicant or is that from
I
a
just got
council
it
member?
from the city attorney. Applicant, okay. So does anyone want to move motion to amend number 2?
So there's no motion to amend
So
number 1, is that, we're going to pass on
Correct.
that? Okay.
We have our attorneys, city attorney conferring with the applicant and the planning director about the status of motion to amend number 2.
Play by play.
Looks
I want
like
to see if we
they're
could make
coming
this
up.
decision last a little longer.
I apologize. I hopefully can bring some clarification. There is a motion to amend number 1 as well that we want to make sure is part of the action, and that has to do with clarification on the reimbursement of funds for public improvements that staff and the applicant are in agreement on. And then there is a motion to amend number 2 and 3. There was 2. I'd like to just be clear, make sure that the applicant is okay with this, that motion to amend number 3 should be brought forward now at this time, and not motion to amend number 2.
Yes, thank you.
So it's functioning as a substitute for
Correct.
motion to amend number 2, is that correct?
Correct.
All right, very good.
So, Mr.
Do we-
Terry,
Trent.
did we
have a-
already introduce motion amendment number 1?
We have not introduced it, but I do have it. It was distributed back in December when we had the public hearing.
Well, I think I just heard Mr. Curry say that that's it.
Can I have a copy of it? I'll take a look at it and move it.
This is, well, yeah, it's 2 pages.
That motion has been coming along through the process.
So it would have been in your packets for the December 19th meeting?
Okay.
That was the public hearing? Yeah.
Yeah, I remember seeing this. I just didn't bring a copy of it with me. At this time, I'll move motion to amend number 1 to acknowledge that the permittee is entitled to reimbursement pursuant to Lincoln Municipal Code 278290 for its construction of the arterial street impact fee facility improvements needed to address traffic impacts created by the proposed development under use permit number 16009.
Okay, can I get some second, moved by Trent and seconded by Carl, discussion? Carl?
Yeah, and looking at it, it makes additions of lanes to both South 14th Street and to Pine Lake to facilitate turns.
Okay. Any discussion on the motion to amend? All right, please call the roll.
Camp?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
No.
Lamb? Yes. Motion carried 4-1. Then we have motion to amend number 3.
Thank you. I'm moving to accept motion to amend number 3, and basically what this does is it maintains full access at 16th and Pine Lake in all directions.
Can we just get a second real quick, Cindy and Hubden?
I'm sorry.
Second.
Seconded by Trent, go ahead, please.
Thank you. So it keeps full access retained in all directions at the intersection of South 16th and Pine Lake Road, and at such time as warrants are met for traffic signal at the intersection of South 16th and Pine Lake Road, a traffic signal shall be installed at the developer's expense. And I will note that as we heard testimony back on the 19th, the reason that I brought this amendment was we heard testimony, we heard from, of course, business owners who are heavily invested south, on the south side of Pine Lake Road, and they want to maintain, of course, full access for their businesses. That was one consideration, and then we had, of course, members of the public, homeowners that lived behind that development and said, hey, if you do put Costco in, we really want that access ourselves. And of course, that added to my consideration of this. But in the final analysis, what my big concern was is that people, if they come out of that 16th Street access and they feel they can only go east, that would be right, in order to eventually go to 14th Street, that they would be making U-turns at the Hazel Scott intersection where we have a signal to try and reduce conflicts and to make it more safe for children. And so I think this is really important, and I've gotten just agreement and commitment by traffic to just move this along as quickly as possible to keep an eye out for those warrants so that the signal can go in.
Discussion on the motion to amend proposed, motion to amend number 3?
Excuse me?
I'm asking for discussion on it. Well, so I'll say that in addition to the other issues that I referenced about safety and appropriateness of land use for this site, I think there's also fit and access issues that have been brought forward again and again. And it reminds me of a pair of shoes that my sister bought that were just not quite the right fit. They were beautiful shoes, and she really wanted those shoes, and she bought them even though they were just like half a size too small. And in the end, she couldn't wear those shoes. They didn't work. They were not good for her feet. There's so many problems with trying to access this site. We're trying to shoehorn in a really big warehouse retail establishment where we don't have the typical access points for a commercial center. And I just want to quote our traffic engineers who strongly oppose trying to put in an unwarranted signal, quote unquote, according to our traffic engineers, the last thing we want is to install an unwarranted signal. Because again, we have this goal of moving people through our community in efficient and safe ways. And others have pointed to other places in the community where this has happened, and I'll quote the traffic engineers again, who said, just because we did it one way previously does not mean we should not attempt to be smarter as we go forward. So precedent doesn't always mean we need to follow it if it's not a good precedent. The traffic engineering memo doesn't support two signals, so I guess what I would ask is, I would ask this, I floated the idea offline of removing the signal at 20th if there's going to be one at 16th to try and balance out our competing interests here, but there wasn't support for it. So based on that, based on all the site access issues that every time we try to fix one area, we end up with a problem in another area of this site, I'm not going to support this motion to amend.
If I may?
Yes.
Thank you. It does not allow for an unwarranted signal to go in. This amendment specifically says, as such a time as the warrants are met for a traffic signal, that it'll go in. The commitment from traffic was simply that they would monitor it so that as soon as one was warranted, then it would go in.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood from our conversation previous to this. I thought you were installing
Yeah.
a signal.
Thank you.
Further discussion? All right, please call the roll.
Camp,
Yes.
Eskridge,
Yes.
Fellers,
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
No.
Lamb.
Yes.
Motion carried 4-1. Ordinance for action only, item 49.
That was on the
So
motion.
sorry,
Yeah.
main motion. I was trying to hurry.
Appreciate that.
Sure. Final vote?
Yes.
Discussion.
Any discussion? Okay, Trent,
Everybody.
then Carl, then John, then Cindy.
This has been an interesting experience, to say the least. I don't remember a development or any item that we have received more communication on than this one. I counted emails yesterday between 10 and noon. I think I received 35 emails on this single issue, and that was just in a 2-hour period on a Sunday. I bet if I went back and counted, I probably received over the course of the last 6 weeks maybe 500 emails on this one item. And that's never happened before. And I think that's something that's really healthy for the community to have that many people weighing in on a single item that's come through. I think we are gaining a really, really high quality employer. I think we are gaining a really, really high quality company that's coming to our community. And some of that in my research has been a really, really good part of the communities that they've gone into. I'm to the shoe fitting argument, driving by this site a number of different times, it'll work here. And that's why I'm supporting it today, and pleased to see this project moving forward, and look forward to the day when they cut the ribbon and open their doors. Thank you.
Okay, Carl?
Thank you. We've not only received a lot of emails, we've received a lot of personal conversations with individuals, which appreciate those to a great deal. Just wanted to share one of those that I had with an individual this last weekend. Was at a community event, and that event, this particular individual is a well-respected business and community leader, somebody who's done great things for our city for a number of years. And he came up to me and said, "Carl, our city is so great. Our city is just doing incredibly well." And he said, "You know, we've got all these new things that are coming to town. We've got, we're offering things that help to keep our kids and our grandkids in the city. We're attracting new employees. We're giving people options of where they can go and what they can do." And he was just so high on our community, 70-year-old guy, all about the great things that are happening in Lincoln. And part of it was this particular issue. I've never set foot in a Costco store. I've never have. But there are a lot of people in this community who have and who long to in this city. It's an important deal to them. It's an important deal that says, in a sense, that to borrow your analogy, we have grown into some shoes, that we've grown up. And this is something that I think is important. But we're the kind of community that we don't just do anything or put anything anywhere. And when this issue came to us as a council, our job really was to look at what we received from the Planning Commission and to make sure that the action of the Planning Commission, which, as I recall, had one negative vote, that their action was somehow wrong and that they missed something. And in checking their work, my feeling was it wasn't the perfect location for us, for me, but there aren't, I don't know that there are any perfect locations. It's situated close to 3 schools, particularly between a middle school and a high school. It's bordered on the north side by a cemetery. Not many complaints there. But we've heard from neighbors on both sides of the street, literally and in terms of opinion, and both ways. Some say who live there, this is terrible for our neighborhood, don't do this to our kids and our families. Others on the same streets say this is really important to us, we want this, please bring it. We've heard from people who live in my district in Air Park area saying this is really important to me. They could probably drive to Omaha almost as quickly. But it's important that Lincoln have this. And I think from what I see, I don't see that there's a safety issue here. And I'm grateful that Costco is coming to be a part of our community, and I'm supporting it.
John.
Well, I'll have to repeat that this is my 18th year on the city council, and for you newbies, this is one of the probably top 5 issues I've encountered over that period of time. And reaching out, I'll have to mention in response to my colleagues, Larry and I bought a pair of shoes too small. And
Or would work with guys. I'm glad you know it does.
I'll tell you, they were the fanciest leather shoes I've ever bought, and I'm so darn fiscally conservative, I wore the darn things. I've got a toe that's suffered because of it.
He's tight.
My feet were tight, too. Trent, you mentioned the biggest measure and your time on the council, and you got 30 emails in 4 hours, I believe you said. And last week I got 60 in 1 hour. It's been an incredible response from both proponents of the measure and opponents of the measure. And I've worked solid on this since mid-December. I did take Christmas Day off, and that was it. And I mean, Sundays I'm talking to people and so forth. Interestingly, in addition to the list of emails that we've gotten and those I've responded to, spent 4.5 hours one morning just responding. I've had a lot of people approach me individually and on both sides of the issue. And I will say that there are very, very many of them. Everybody's been responsible in approaching this issue, but people I really respect on both sides of the issues, and that's made it doubly hard for me. I think all of you know, some of you checked with me this morning, and I haven't really evidenced any decision on this. So anyway, I look at this as, I boiled it down and I've talked to proponents and opponents on 2 to 3 different issues embellished in it. The first, and I'm not, several of you have said something before, but the first is the proximity between the schools. I believe I had one email saying that 10% of LPS students attend either the 2 schools, Scott Middle School and Lincoln Southwest High School, or they may have been including the Adams Elementary School. I mean, that's a lot of children. I never heard anything out of the educators, out of LPS, which was surprising. I know at times we have a respect for our sister governmental entities, but I would have thought there'd been something here. I had a lot of parents say they were very concerned about their children and the traffic congestion and the safety, and that is of paramount interest. The second issue somewhat ties into that, and that's the traffic. I was intrigued when we had our testimony, our public hearing. There was an individual, and I don't recall who, but showed us maps of other Costco stores that primarily were located on arterials or interstates. Pine Lake here is kind of less than a major arterial, and it tees into 16th Street, so that's concerned me all along. To its credit, Costco has said in meetings and all that it's going to fund a lot of improvements and turn lanes, the traffic lights and so forth. They reconfigured the pedestrian way to the north of the development. They beefed up the way the bike lanes go through there. Essentially the other night I had some people for the project but were against the location of the bike lanes, so the trail, excuse me. So that's been a difficult one. Another issue in this matter, and I guess it's sort of a dual issue of the amount that Lincoln is open for business and that we let the market forces work themselves. And that's hard to do. You know, by nature, our zoning laws are a way that this city, the elected officials and so forth, dictate some areas where certain types of businesses can occur. So we already are in that field, and you know, is this the best location? I thought it was interesting when I visited with one of the representatives of Costco that he mentioned that one of the marketplace, the demographics for Costco tends to be, it started out as businesses, small businesses, and then it gravitated to the membership and for people, and they look to various, all demographics, but a lot of it in the middle income and so forth. And I thought, well, gosh, that's kind of South Central Lincoln and Southeast Lincoln, and this is East Lincoln, or excuse me, this is West Lincoln. And West Lincoln's not going to really grow because of Wilderness Park to the west, and it's not going to go that much to the south. So I put that in the mix, and it's been very difficult. It's a decision that I'm going to support this, but I'm going to be watching it very carefully. And I especially want to thank the individuals that came forth, those who were in favor and those who were against it, because they did raise these important issues. As everyone has said, no one came out against Costco coming to Lincoln. I think most people have wanted that for many years, and to have a healthy competition. But there are these concerns, and I'm going to watch Costco closely, and I hope that they fulfill their promises and they ensure that if there's some fine tuning that needs to be done, that they do that so that we protect our children in the school situation. I think the children are going to walk across their lot. They're not going to follow sidewalks. They're kind of like the old-fashioned cowboys. They go from cactus to cactus despite what you put there for them. So we've got to be mindful of that. And on the traffic congestion, I think there will be more traffic congestion. I'm a little torn as to who all to believe on this, but it's going to be more, and it's going to be a little bit more challenging because this isn't a major arterial situation. So I thank you for letting me make those comments.
Cindy.
Thank you. This was difficult. On the one hand, it was wonderful to have so much citizen participation. I really was thrilled by that. Not only did Costco have meetings, but those folks, both proponents and opponents, reached out to us and had meetings with us individually or in small groups, and I appreciated that very much. This is an important project. I didn't have my mind made up until just very recently, and the safety concerns were my number one priority, and I felt like Costco really addressed those very well. And the second signal, the waiting until it's warranted is a good idea. I happen to have an office up at 29th and Pine Lake, and there's a signal there that's 2 blocks from the 27th and Pine Lake intersection. And the fact that there's a signal warranted there and not at 16th and Pine Lake at this point in time tells me that there's room for growth in even the traffic pattern. And so although I too wanted to pay close attention to the traffic, I think that this plan handles that. Costco's willing to pay for the both the signal at Hazel Scott and the additional signal when it's warranted. Not only were the safety issues addressed, but I think that I heard a lot about Costco as an employer and as a community partner. And Costco, wherever they are a great supporter of schools. So I'm actually looking forward to them being able to partner with schools that are very close to them. I anticipate that will be exactly what happens. And even though I understand the concerns of some folks, I also believe that our job is to make sure that those concerns have been addressed, and I feel like they had. Got to tell you, the first words out of my mouth is I'd love to have Costco in Northeast Lincoln, because that's my district. I think that it would be fun up there, but see, that wasn't a choice I had. We don't get to choose where they want to build. We get to choose if we've made the appropriate accommodations and taken care of our citizens once the choice has been made and it's gone through all the planning process and they've jumped through all the hoops. And so in the end, I'm going to support this project, and I'm going to welcome Costco, as I know everyone is, because we did overwhelmingly hear we love Costco, we want Costco. The only detractions were not necessarily that location.
Well, to wrap up, I'll just say location, location, location. This debate has always been about location and weighing the benefits of a new Costco against the safety of school children. We all want Costco. I'm glad Costco wants to be in Lincoln. I just don't think Costco belongs right next to 2 schools. Please call the roll. Camp?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes. No. Habit? No.
Lamb? Yes. Motion carried 4-1. Next then, we have an ordinance for action only. 9, amending Title 10 of the Lincoln Municipal Code relating to the safe operation on city sidewalks, streets, and crosswalks by people using skates, skateboards, scooters, toy vehicles, and similar conveyances by adding a new section numbered 10.02.316, amending section 10.24.010, and repealing section 10.24.010 of the Lincoln Municipal Code as hitherto existing. And this, Jane's going?
Okay.
Christensen.
Teresa, can we just wait for Jane
Sure.
to join us? Okay, we are
So-
back.
So who introduced that?
You.
You did.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Seconded by Trent. And
We're on item 49.
Yes.
Nice, skateboards.
Skateboards. And we have a motion to amend number 1 that was introduced by Camp.
So moved.
you want to
And I think that was
read it?
to define, I don't have it in front of me, but
It was to clarify bicycles are not considered conveyances.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Do we have a second?
Do we have-
Second?
Seconded by Jane, discussion? I want to thank John for this important clarification. All right, please call the roll.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0.
Madam
now
Chair,
on
I'm
the-
going to put that on my
on the-
tombstone, that
on the
Mr.
mayor.
Camp knew the difference between a conveyance and a bicycle.
I'm sorry, are we on the
Main
main
motion,
The
right?
main motion.
Main motion.
Okay, go ahead, discussion on the main motion.
I have received so many communications from senior citizens who feel that this ordinance change allows for these skateboards and bicycles and such in a way that would threaten them. They like the policy as it is, so that anybody using these non-conveyances, whatever we're going to call them, would be in violation, not just if they were doing it recklessly. I've received a lot of communications on this, and I'm not going to support this because the senior citizens want to go downtown, but if we make it unwelcoming, they won't want to go.
Any other discussion?
Well, I wasn't going to say anything, but we've built a whole bunch of student housing projects in the downtown area, and those students are riding bikes and riding skateboards every single day. And we certainly want to be welcoming to them. They can be charged if they are operating their skateboards or bicycles in an unsafe manner. And that's what we're going to have to trust, is that they will follow those regulations and behave appropriately as they do now. And where they don't, that they get reported and held accountable.
Trent?
I just want to echo Carl's comments. Working in the software industry, I have a couple of coworkers that are that longboard to work, which I would have never guessed I would know somebody that longboards to work. And their comments to me is that it's actually safer to be on a skateboard or a longboard than a bike if you're in a pedestrian area, because you can get off of that conveyance, if you will, and there's a little bit more control on avoiding people, and the people that I know are very safe with how their community to work there. So I'm pleased to support this.
All right, any further comments, discussion? All right, please call the roll.
Camp?
No.
Christensen?
No.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
No.
Raybold?
Yes.
Motion carried, 4-3. Resolutions on first reading are items 50 through 54. Ordinances first reading are items 55 through 60. Anyone wishing to address the council on a matter not on this agenda and not planned for a future agenda may do so at this time.
Madam Chair, I see no one coming forward. I move for adjournment.
Second.
Moved by John and seconded by Roy. Please call the roll.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes,
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0.
we are adjourned.